When I was little, my mom met my sister's dad. He told her straight away that I wouldn't matter much to him because I wasn't his kid. Mom was okay with that. They moved in together soon after meeting, and he never really paid attention to me. I was just there when they had my sister Katie. They were married by then, and Katie was always his favorite. Katie and I didn't really get along. Sometimes we were okay, but I'd back off when she started praising her dad and saying how lucky we were to have him. Even after her dad told her I wasn't his kid and she was the only one who mattered to him, she'd still talk about him as if he was amazing to both of us. Our mom always told me I had to accept having a different dad than Katie and be okay with it. She said kids can have different parents and still be close siblings. Katie always got everything, and she often reminded me of that. She'd ask why I didn't have nice clothes, or why I didn't eat with them, or why I didn't join them for outings with Dad. She'd tell me to speak up for myself. Once, she pestered me all day to ask Dad for new clothes, so I did just to get her off my back. But Dad didn't understand why I was asking him for anything, and that was the end of it. Katie said I gave up too easily. When Mom got sick when I was a teenager, I decided to tell Katie everything, hoping she'd understand. But she insisted her dad was still my dad because he raised me, and I should treat him like my dad. She brushed off everything I said, but she was just a kid, so I get it. I moved out just before turning 18, and then Mom died. It wasn't surprising that I wasn't welcome at the funeral. Katie wanted me there, but her dad made it clear it wasn't my place. Honestly, I didn't feel sad about missing the funeral because I had a strained relationship with Mom. 6 years later, Katie's dad got diagnosed with a terminal illness because he hadn't taken care of himself. I'm 24 now, and Katie's 20. She called me when they got the news, saying we needed to help take care of him. I told Katie I wouldn't do it. She said we couldn't abandon him, that we owed him better than leaving him alone. But I disagreed. I felt like I didn't owe him anything. He never cared for me and even criticized me for not being his kid. I wasn't going to comfort him in his final months. Katie said she couldn't handle it alone. I suggested she let others help her, but I wasn't going to care for someone who treated me poorly when I had no say in the matter. She called me selfish, saying she needed my help because I was all she had. Am I wrong? No, you're not wrong. Katie should know better now, even if she was just a kid before. But your mom made the mistake by marrying this man who didn't accept you. Your mom shouldn't have let someone into her life who didn't care for you. He took away your childhood, and you don't owe him anything. You don't owe your mom anything either. Katie seems self-centered and selfish. Your stepfather mistreated you, and your mom let it happen. It's sad that your mom prioritized finding a husband over your well-being. That part of your life is over now, so don't let Katie drag you back. He made it clear he wasn't your dad, and Katie living in her own world doesn't change that truth. Consider cutting her out of your life for good. She comes across as a spoiled favorite child lacking empathy, maybe even finding satisfaction in your suffering. It's best to disengage and move on. I became a mom 18 weeks ago, but I kept my pregnancy mostly secret, only sharing the news with my husband's parents and my sister. The announcement didn't sit well with my dad, his wife, or my half-sister. For those wondering why I kept it from them, there are 2 reasons. A few years ago, I believed I was pregnant but experienced a loss. I had openly shared the positive test, and when the truth came out, my dad's wife became overbearing. She believed I needed her as a mother figure since she married my dad after our mom passed away when my sister and I were young. However, she was too intrusive. Even after everything I went through, she wouldn't respect my need for space, and my husband had to ask her to leave our home. Another reason is that my sister has 2 kids. During both pregnancies, our dad's wife constantly pressured her about needing her as a mother figure. She insisted on being there for my sister during her pregnancy and talked about how it would strengthen their bond and make my sister appreciate her more. My sister ended up resenting her because of this. While neither of us were ever big fans of hers, my sister grew to despise her because she was convinced she would replace our mom by being there for her during pregnancy. She even dismissed my sister's feelings of missing our mom, saying pregnancy made women irrational and there was no reason to miss a ghost. Since then, my sister has refused to let our dad's wife be called grandma by her kids. All of this influenced my decision to keep quiet about my pregnancy when it happened. I don't live near my dad anymore, so I just stayed away. I also knew it would hurt their feelings, but I honestly didn't care. My dad was furious, and his wife and my half-sister sent me messages accusing me of being cruel and unfair, saying I robbed them of the excitement and tainted the whole experience. They both emphasized how important it was for Dad's wife to become a grandma for the third time, especially since her other grandkids would never call her grandma. And they called me selfish for not considering her joy. Am I the one at fault here? Absolutely not. Your stepmother seems overly controlling. You did what was best for yourself, your husband, and your child. Your pregnancy and birth were about your own family, not about meeting their expectations. You can't force relationships to be close. They either naturally develop or they don't. Step-parents who try to replace a deceased parent usually fail to create the bonds they hope for. Did she expect your baby to start calling her grandma as soon as it was born? She's not really your stepmother. She's just your dad's second wife. It seems like they need a reality check to understand that their idealized family fantasy isn't real and won't come true. They're still upset because they're holding onto their fantasy and feel hurt when it's not fulfilled. The only way to get them to respect your boundaries is for them to accept reality as it is. You're doing the right thing by protecting your family and setting boundaries. Congratulations on your new baby, sending you lots of peaceful baby vibes. My husband's sister moved in with us after a big argument about the baby's name. They're expecting a baby, and she's 7 months along. She's known to be particular about food and refuses to eat what we normally cook. We've been catering to her by preparing her favorite dishes, which unfortunately I can't eat due to allergies. So every evening, I have to figure out what to eat since she only wants food that I'm allergic to. Last night, my husband agreed to cook separate meals for her and us together. However, when I got home after a long day at work, I discovered that my sister-in-law had convinced him to cook only her preferred meal and cancel the one we had planned. They were eating together in the kitchen when I arrived. Apologetically, my husband explained that his sister persuaded him to eat with her and not to cook the meal I wanted for us both. I pretended it was okay and ordered food from a restaurant instead. After showering and doing some work on my laptop, I returned to the kitchen to find my order on the counter, open and mostly eaten. I turned around to see my sister-in-law standing there, admitting she couldn't resist the smell and had helped herself to the food. I lost my temper and yelled at her, demanding to know why she did that. She claimed she saved me some, but there was hardly anything left except rice and dressings. We argued, and I reached my limit. I told her to pack her things and leave first thing in the morning. She started crying, and my husband defended her, insisting that she was pregnant and eating for two. Finally, he suggested I quickly make something for myself from the fridge and let it go. But I refused, leading to a bigger argument. Am I wrong for kicking her out over this? Not at all. You don't just have a sister-in-law problem, your husband is a big part of the issue. Your sister-in-law does sound selfish and entitled, pregnant or not, but the real issue lies with your husband prioritizing her needs over yours. How did he think it was acceptable to deny you dinner that you were expecting, especially when you couldn't even eat what she wanted? Your sister-in-law is in the wrong, but your husband is the one who needs to reassess his priorities. It's baffling how little they seem to care about you. Seriously, just toss the whole family out. Their treatment of you is unacceptable. I don't understand why your husband would agree to not cook for you. It's nonsensical. How could he be okay with that? Perhaps he could have cooked the same meal for himself and his sister and something else for you. Where do people find spouses like this? And this is the same woman who left her husband over a disagreement about baby names. Clearly, she's unbearable. Who walks out over baby names? Parenthood is stressful. I've been there with 2 kids. But seriously, if one person disagreed with a name, it was a no-go. So in your position, I wouldn't have even let her stay in the first place. I'd tell her to sort it out and go back to her own house to eat her food. Your husband and sister-in-law are being incredibly disrespectful. If I were you, I'd ask your sister-in-law's husband if you could spend a week at his place since his wife is driving you crazy. I bet both your husband and your sister-in-law would quickly resolve all their fights in Brazil. There's a saying that doesn't quite translate into English but fits perfectly here. The cure for crazy is crazier. The only winner in this situation seems to be your brother-in-law, who's getting a break from all this drama. My fiancé and I recently got engaged and chose our wedding party. My bridesmaids are my 2 closest friends, and his groomsmen are my brothers. One of them is his best friend, and the other is someone he's known for just as long. They've been like big brothers to him. My fiancé has a younger sister who's 4 years younger than him. She's a cancer survivor, and her experience has also shaped their relationship. His parents clearly favor her, showering her with excessive attention and expecting everyone else to do the same. She knows how to manipulate people by leveraging the special treatment she receives. My fiancé has admitted that he sometimes can't stand her. Whenever he refuses her requests, she guilt-trips him by bringing up her cancer or accusing him of wishing she had died. Although he's not estranged from his family, he's not particularly close to them either. He holds a lot of resentment towards his parents, blaming them for favoring his sister and neglecting him during his childhood. He felt overshadowed by her illness and then was expected to treat her like royalty. When we discussed our wedding party, my fiancé expressed his desire not to include his sister. I respected his decision, especially since, to be frank, I have no personal connection to her whatsoever. We've never spent time together or formed any sort of bond. Apparently, she and my fiancé's parents were expecting her to be asked to be a bridesmaid once they heard about our engagement. However, I hadn't planned on inviting her. I had already chosen my 2 closest friends to be bridesmaids. When his parents and sister confronted me about it, I explained that I hadn't intended to include her in the bridal party. They argued that she's family and important to my fiancé. I explained that while she may be important to him, she isn't close to me, and asking me to include her in my bridal party felt inappropriate. They called me foolish and insisted that I should try harder. They even suggested that she deserved a place in the bridal party more than anyone else, and that thinking otherwise made me seem like a bully, especially considering all she's been through. Am I wrong here? You're not wrong, but your fiancé should also step up and express that he doesn't want her in the bridal party. It's a joint decision, and both of you have the right to choose who stands beside you on your big day. It's unfair that you're shouldering all the blame for this when it's a decision you both made together. The parents are crossing boundaries here, and your fiancé should support you in setting limits with them. Consider reducing or cutting contact with them if their behavior persists. It's concerning how they try to manipulate situations to favor his sister. If you and your fiancé have a child, they might even suggest giving her the baby because she's a cancer survivor. It's crucial to limit their involvement in wedding planning to prevent any unwanted surprises, like her showing up in the same colors as your bridesmaids or wearing a white dress to steal attention. Let your fiancé handle his family. He needs to address this with them. I, a 27-year-old woman, lived with my parents until last week. I have a dog whom I adore. She's been my best companion since I graduated from university. I'm not very social and prefer her company over most people I know. While I've had boyfriends and even a short-lived relationship that ended amicably, I'm just not interested in much beyond my work and my dog. My parents view this as a shortcoming, but I don't. My brother also resides with us. He's in high school and doesn't contribute financially. I cover about 50% of the household expenses, including groceries. I occupy the basement suite, which, while not legally rentable, suits a family member's needs according to building codes. Converting it for renting would be costly and impractical. My mom concluded that the reason I'm not actively seeking a husband is because my dog demands too much of my attention. While my pup does have some health issues, they are manageable and don't affect her quality of life significantly. Despite this, my mom gave her away while I was at work. When I returned home, my dog was gone, along with all her belongings, her toys, leash, everything. I confronted my mom, insisting she tell me where my dog was, threatening to involve the authorities and accuse them of theft if she didn't comply. I retrieved my dog from where she was being held and then returned to my parents' house to gather my belongings. Afterward, I went to stay with a friend. My dad has been reaching out, asking for money to cover expenses for the month. I reminded him that he should have considered this before allowing someone to take my dog. Unfortunately, my dad lost his job due to the current global situation, and they're struggling to cover all the household expenses without my contribution. He mentioned that they'll run out of money in 3 months without my assistance. However, I no longer trust them. My family believes I'm foolish for prioritizing my dog over them. Am I wrong? You're not wrong at all. Your parents were clearly taking advantage of you. You were paying half of everything, including what should have been market rent for a basement suite that wasn't even up to code. That's unacceptable on so many levels. And that's before they decided to get rid of your dog. They deserve to face the consequences of their actions. Whatever you decide, never give them another penny. I'm relieved that you were able to retrieve your dog and find a safe place for both of you to stay. Perhaps they can consider moving into the basement and renting out the upstairs room. Problem solved, OP. Living with people who steal from you and try to control you is unsustainable. They're solely responsible for the current situation. Everyone should pull their weight and work, while you find a place far from them where you and your dog can enjoy life. Additionally, if the mother's concern is that you're not seeking a husband, does she expect you to get married and have everyone live together in your home while you continue to support them financially? Or would she expect you to move out and still contribute as if you were living there? The same issue would arise. Your parents' actions have led to this situation, and at almost 30, it's unacceptable for them to still rely on you financially. They should have considered this before betraying your trust and alienating you. It's not just about the dog, it's about rebuilding trust.
My name is Lara. My life at 45 was a testament to what hard work and independence could achieve. Over $10,000 a month wasn't just a number, it was my declaration of success in a high-stakes game. Back when I was knee-deep in the MLM hustle, making a name and some solid cash for myself, Tom came into the picture. He was all charm and smarts, totally taken with the way I managed my business with a kind of independence that seemed to draw him in like a moth to a flame. He started showing up more, offering to help out with business stuff, or just to grab a coffee. I wasn't looking for anything serious, mind you. I liked my freedom, liked making my own rules and breaking them if I felt like it. But Tom, he had a way about him, a persistence that wasn't pushy but kind of endearing. "You're not like most folks I meet in this gig," I told him once, over coffee. "Most guys run for the hills when they hear network marketing." Tom chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee. "Maybe I like the view from the hills. Gives me a chance to see who's climbing up to meet me." It was this blend of humor and sincerity that drew me to him. Our meetings became more frequent, and Tom's interest in my world grew. He asked questions, real ones that made me explain my business in ways I hadn't even considered. It was refreshing, invigorating, and, dare I say, flirtatious. We'd sit and chat about everything under the sun, and it wasn't long before he started talking about his mom. Now, I've always been close to my own folks, so hearing him speak so respectfully about his mother caught my attention. It wasn't just talk, you could tell he meant every word, held her in high regard. And that, I could respect. "Yeah, my mom's the real deal," he'd say with a kind of pride that lit up his face. "She's been through a lot, you know? Raised me all on her own. She's my rock." Hearing that stirred something in me. I've seen my own parents stick out the tough times, their love and respect for each other a constant through it all. I guess that's what got me seeing Tom in a new light. So, when he asked me to marry him, it wasn't the grand gesture or the promise of a life of ease that got me to say yes. It was the simple, honest love he had for his family. I thought, anyone who holds his family in such high regard, who talks about his mom with that much admiration, he's got to be a good man at heart. We got hitched, and those first few months were something out of a dream. Laughs, late-night talks about where we wanted our little empire to go, weekend getaways, just because we could. I was happy, genuinely happy, thinking I'd found someone who got me, who respected my hustle and had my back. After the initial bliss of our unconventional meeting and the whirlwind romance that followed, settling into married life with Tom brought its own set of challenges. One thing that started to stick out was Tom's relationship with his mother, Carol. It wasn't just close, it was suffocatingly tight. They were on the phone multiple times a day, and our weekends were monopolized by visits to her place. It started to gnaw at me, the extent of his attachment and the expectations it placed on us, especially me. One Saturday morning, as we were gearing up for yet another weekend at Carol's, I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. "Tom, do we have to spend every weekend doing chores at your mom's? I mean, doesn't she have anyone else to help out?" Tom looked at me like I'd just suggested we moon the neighbors. "Lara, she's old, and it's just us. Who else is gonna do it?" I sighed, frustration bubbling. "But, it's every weekend. Don't you think it's a bit much?" I've got stuff I'd like to do too, you know? His brow furrowed, and he crossed his arms, a clear sign he was digging in. Look, Lara, she's my mom. She's always been there for me, and now it's my turn. I thought you'd understand that. The conversation was going nowhere, a stalemate between his unwavering loyalty to his mother and my growing resentment towards the situation. It was a red flag, flapping furiously in the wind of our relationship, but I chose to ignore it, convincing myself it was just a phase. As weeks turned into months, the red flags multiplied. Tom's sarcasm about my work began to surface more frequently. It was subtle at first, almost playful, but there was an undercurrent of disdain that I couldn't overlook. One evening, after a long day of video calls and client follow-ups, I settled next to Tom on the couch, laptop still warm from use. Phew, nailed another big client today. This could be a game changer for us, I said, trying to share my excitement. Tom, eyes glued to the TV, grunted in response. Oh, yeah, that's great. But don't you think it's time you considered a real job? You know, one that doesn't have you glued to that screen all day? I bristled, my enthusiasm cooling into annoyance. A real job? Tom, this is a real job. I'm making more than we'd ever dreamed of. What's not real about that? He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. I dunno, Lara. It's just, all this network marketing stuff seems a bit dodgy, doesn't it? The word stung, a slap to everything I'd worked so hard to achieve. Dodgy? You know what, Tom? Maybe you should spend a day in my shoes, before you start judging. The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered, a thick fog between us that didn't dissipate. Tom's inability to value my career, coupled with his abnormal attachment to his mother, left me feeling isolated in my own marriage. The red flags were no longer just flapping in the wind, they were blaring sirens, warning me of the storm ahead. Yet, I pressed on, hoping for a change, clinging to the memories of our early days. But as time passed, it became increasingly clear that Tom's loyalty was split in a way that left little room for us, for me. The endless weekends at Carol's, my mother-in-law's place, had turned from a mild inconvenience into a full-blown chore. Every visit was the same routine: sit at the dining table, nod along to Carol's lectures on housekeeping and the importance of saving every penny, and watch Tom hang on to every word she said as gospel. It was like stepping back in time, and I was wearing thin. One such afternoon, as Carol went on about the virtues of homemade meals over eating out, Tom chimed in, his voice laced with that now familiar sarcasm. Yeah, Lara, maybe you should take a page out of Mom's book. All that time on your computer, and what do you have to show for it? A strange business that no one understands. I felt my cheeks burn, a mix of anger and embarrassment. Tom, we've been over this. My strange business is paying our bills, and then some. I'm working, not playing around on the internet. He scoffed, shooting a look at Carol, who wore a smug expression. A real job doesn't have you stuck at home all day. It's about getting out there, dealing with real people, not just numbers on a screen. The jab stung, more so because it was made in front of Carol, who nodded in agreement as if she had any say in our finances. I bit back the retort on the tip of my tongue, realizing it was futile. Tom was echoing his mother's outdated views, and there was no winning against a united front. Feeling isolated and misunderstood, I decided to seek refuge with my parents. They were old school in their own way, but they understood the value of hard work, regardless of the form it took. Their reaction to Tom's criticisms was a mix of anger and disappointment. Lara, it's clear he's jealous, my dad said, his brow furrowed in concern. Envious because you're succeeding without having to trudge to some office every day. Don't let his insecurities drag you down. My mom nodded, her hand squeezing mine. You're doing amazing, sweetheart. Tom needs to see that. He's supposed to support you, not tear you down. Their words were a balm to my frayed nerves, and with a renewed sense of resolve, I returned home, hoping to clear the air with Tom. But what awaited me was far from the reconciliation I'd hoped for. Tom was livid, pacing the living room like a caged animal. So, you ran to your parents to complain about me? About us? He accused, not even bothering to greet me. I was taken aback by the intensity of his anger. Tom, I needed some perspective. They're my parents. Who else am I supposed to talk to? His laugh was harsh, void of any humor. Perspective? Or you wanted them to take your side, tell you how wrong I am? They're poisoning you against me, Lara. That's not true, and you know it, I countered, my own anger rising. They're worried about us, about how we're not communicating. It's not about taking sides. But Tom wouldn't hear it. No, it's always about sides with you. Your business, your money, your parents. What about me, Lara? When do I get to be a part of this marriage? Eventually, the tension cooled, and we found our way back to a fragile truce, but the cracks remained, widening with every sarcastic comment, every dismissive gesture. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles in your stomach like a bad meal, as we sat around Carol's, my mother-in-law's, cluttered dining table. As usual, Tom and Carol were in their element, a duo of traditional views and thinly veiled jabs at my expense. Today's topic of choice, once again, geared towards the proper roles in marriage, a well Carol seemed to draw from endlessly. You know, Lara, Tom started, his voice laced with that familiar patronizing tone. Mom's right. There's more to being a wife than just making money. Maybe it's time you started focusing on what really matters. I clenched my fists under the table, my patience wearing thin. And what, according to you, really matters? Cleaning? Cooking? Being at your beck and call? Carol jumped in, her voice sharp. Exactly. It's about making a home, caring for your husband. Not glued to a screen all day. I know plenty of women who'd be more than happy to take your place, ones who understand the value of a proper marriage. The audacity of her words struck a nerve. Oh, is that so? I shot back, my voice rising despite my attempts to keep calm. You think you can just replace me with some step-forward wife who fits your outdated idea of a proper marriage? Tom's allegiance was clear as he nodded along with his mother's cruel suggestion. Lara, you're missing the point. It's not about replacing you. It's about what's best for us, for our family. Best for us? Or best for you and your mother? I countered, feeling the weight of their united front. Since when did our marriage become a three-person decision? The humiliation of being openly discussed as replaceable, as if I were nothing more than a poor fit in their perfect world, was a new low. Feeling cornered and outnumbered, I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You know what? If you're so convinced you can find someone better, then maybe you should. I spat out, the hurt evident in my voice. Tom looked taken aback, as if he hadn't expected his words and his mother's to cut so deep. But the damage was done, the line drawn in the sand. I thought marriage was about partnership, support, and love. Not constant criticism and unrealistic expectations, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. There was a heavy silence, one that spoke volumes about the state of our relationship. As I walked out of the room, the sound of my footsteps echoed, a resolute declaration that I wouldn't be belittled or demeaned any longer. After the last blow-up, I was done. Done with the weekend cleanups at Carol's, done with the moralizing, just done. Tom tried to guilt-trip me about it, calling me selfish, saying I didn't care about family. But I wasn't having any of it this time. I had reached my limit. Then came the day that broke the camel's back. I noticed our joint account was bleeding money, a lot of it. Money we'd been scrimping and saving for a new car, our dream car. My heart raced as I logged into our online banking, only to see a massive transaction that nearly wiped us out. I confronted Tom the moment he walked through the door. Where's the money, Tom? The car fund, it's practically gone. He couldn't look me in the eye. I had to use it for something important. Important? What could possibly be more important than what we've been saving for? I was fuming, barely containing my anger. It was for Mom's trip, her dream cruise to Europe. He mumbled it out like a confession. I was stunned into silence for a moment. You used our savings? For a cruise? Without even asking me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tom finally faced me, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. I thought you'd understand. It's her dream. Her dream? What about our dreams, Tom? What about our plans? I was shouting now, my voice echoing off the walls. He had no answer, just stood there looking pathetic. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called Carol, hoping, maybe foolishly, that she'd see reason. Carol, this has to stop. Tom used our savings for your trip. This is a mistake. You need to cancel it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her laughter over the phone was like acid. Cancel? Why would I do that? It's a gift from my son. And as for the money, dear, I'm sure you can earn it back. The contempt in her voice was palpable. You're not even going to consider it? After everything, this is how little you think of me? I was grasping at straws, but I had to try. Listen, darling, I'm not refusing a trip of a lifetime. And if you're not happy, well, Tom's already prepared for that too. Check the desk drawer, she said, her voice cold. I hung up and went straight to the desk, my hands trembling. There, among bills and old receipts, were the divorce papers, signed and ready to go, as if Tom had been planning this all along. My heart wasn't just broken, it was pulverized. I signed them, my hands steady, but my soul in turmoil. Packing my bags felt like I was erasing a part of my life, a part one once cherished. As I zipped up the last of my luggage, Tom finally spoke up. His words were a cold dagger. I saw how you talked to my mother. No respect. You don't deserve to be in this house. You don't deserve me. His words hit me like a slap. The arrogance. The conceit. To think he saw himself as some prize, worth fighting over, after everything that happened. It was laughable, if it wasn't so tragic. Yeah? Well, maybe I don't want to deserve a man who thinks so little of me. Who values his mother's happiness over his wife's. My voice was calm, but inside, I was a whirlwind of emotion. Tom just shrugged, a smug look on his face. Good luck finding someone who'll put up with you like I did. I shook my head, disbelief and anger mingling. Trust me, Tom, the only thing I'll be looking for is peace. Something you and your mother never gave me. Leaving that house, I felt a weight lifting off me. It was the end of one chapter and the start of another. Driving to my parents' house, the emotions were overwhelming. But as soon as I saw the familiar front door, a sense of relief washed over me. This was home. This was where I belonged. My parents were shocked at first, but their support was unwavering. You're back now, and that's all that matters, my dad said, his voice firm and comforting. Mom was more fiery. Let him live with his mother if he loves her so much. You'll find peace now, without their constant badgering. And she was right. I threw myself into my work, my independence blossoming in the absence of Tom's and Carol's criticism. Saving money became easier without the drain of their demands. Slowly, I started to build a life for myself, one where I was in control, where my achievements were celebrated, not belittled. Living with my parents again, I rediscovered what support and love felt like. It wasn't long before I was able to move into my own place, a small but cozy house that was all mine. No Carol to judge me, no Tom to disappoint me. Just me, my work, and the peace I had longed for. Reflecting on everything that happened, I realized Tom was no prize. The real prize was finding myself again, rebuilding my life on my terms. I found strength I never knew I had, and a sense of peace that was priceless. Months had passed since I left Tom and his overbearing mother behind, settling into a rhythm of work, savings, and peace that had long eluded me. My new life was a quiet one, filled with small joys and achievements that were entirely my own. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Carol. Hello? My voice was cautious, the old feelings of tension instantly creeping back. Lara, it's Carol. We need your help. Her voice was shaky, a far cry from the confident, often haughty tone I was used to. I was taken aback. My help? Why would you call me after everything? It's Tom, she said, and I could hear the strain in her voice. He's sick, Lara. Very sick. Lung cancer. The news hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, I felt a pang of concern. I'm sorry to hear that, Carol. But why are you telling me this? Because he needs you, Lara. He needs your support, your forgiveness. We need the money for his treatment. You were always the one who managed to pull things together, she pleaded. I was stunned into silence for a moment. The audacity of her request left me speechless. You want my money? After you practically pushed me out of your lives? Carol's voice hardened. You can hold on to your grudges, Lara, but this is life and death. You were his wife. Doesn't that mean anything to you? The old Carol was back, it seemed. Being his wife didn't seem to mean much when you two were scheming behind my back, I retorted, my initial shock turning into indignation. Lara, please. I wouldn't be calling if there was any other way. Think of the good times, of what you had with Tom. She tried to soften her tone, playing on my emotions. Good times? Carol, you made sure there were as few of those as possible. You and Tom made your bed. Now, you get to lie in it, I said, the years of frustration and hurt fueling my words. There was a pause, and then Carol's voice came through, colder and sharper than before. Fine. If that's how you want to play it. But remember, you're turning your back on Tom in his time of need. Not me. The call ended, and I sat there, phone in hand, a tumult of emotion swirling within me. Anger, guilt, sadness, a cocktail of feelings for a man who had chosen his mother over our life together, and for a woman who saw me as nothing more than a bank. In that moment, I realized the true extent of my freedom. I was no longer bound by their expectations, their demands, or their crises. My life was my own, built on my efforts, my sacrifices. The call, unexpected as it was, served as a stark reminder of the life I had left behind, a life filled with manipulation and emotional blackmail. As I put the phone down, a sense of resolve settled over me. My departure from Tom and Carol's lives was not just a physical one, it was an emotional and financial break too. I had moved on, building something that was entirely mine, free from their shadows. I started diving into investments, reading up every book and article I could get my hands on, and slowly, I began to see the fruits of my labor. My world became numbers and trends, a far cry from the emotional turmoil I left behind. Word got around, as it always does, about Tom's worsening condition and how Carol was barely managing. They'd blown through whatever savings they had, living a life far removed from the comfort they once knew. And Carol, ever the martyr in her own story, made sure everyone knew how I abandoned them in their time of need, painting me as the heartless ex-wife. I heard these rumors from Jenna one afternoon over coffee. She hesitated before telling me, probably expecting me to react. But the truth was, I felt nothing but a distant pity for them. Can you believe it, Lara? Carol's out there telling anyone who'll listen about how you left them high and dry, Jenna said, her voice tinged with disbelief. I shrugged, taking a sip of my coffee. Let her talk, Jenna. Her words don't touch me anymore. I've moved on, and I'm investing in my future, something they never thought to do. Jenna looked at me, a mix of surprise and admiration in her eyes. You're really over it, aren't you? I mean, completely. I nodded, a smile playing on my lips. Completely. My life's taken a turn for the better since I stopped letting them define my worth. I'm making smart investments, learning more every day. Their opinions, their struggles, they're just echoes of a life I left behind. It was liberating, this feeling of complete detachment from the chaos that once consumed me. The rumors, the pitying glances, they meant nothing now. I was building something lasting, investing in myself and my future. The contrast between my growing stability and their dwindling fortunes was stark, but it was the result of choices we each made. As I continued to expand my knowledge and portfolio, the satisfaction of seeing my investments grow was unmatched. I was proving to myself, more than anyone else, that I could thrive on my own terms. The independence and financial security I was building were my true vindication, far removed from the petty squabbles and desperate gossip of Carol's making. One evening, as I reviewed my investment portfolio, the growth and progress reflected in those numbers filled me with a sense of pride. This was real, tangible proof of my resilience and foresight. The rumors, Carol's bitterness, Tom's struggles, they were just background noise to the symphony of my new life. In this quiet moment of reflection, I realized the true extent of my transformation. I had not only survived the storm, but emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. My past with Tom and Carol was a chapter closed, a lesson learned, and my future was a canvas I was eager to fill with the colors of success and peace. I remember that day like it was just yesterday. It was one of those rare days off where I decided to take matters into my own hands and clean the house. My parents' old place was more than just a house to me, it was a sanctuary filled with memories. After they passed, I kept everything the same, living a life they would have been proud of, simple, modest, and grounded, despite the wealth they left behind. So, there I was, knee-deep in dust and nostalgia, wearing the most unflattering outfit you could imagine, an old tee and faded jeans, hair tied up in a makeshift bun, with gloves that had seen better days. The sun was setting, and my stomach was rumbling, reminding me I had skipped lunch in my cleaning frenzy. Deciding to treat myself, I picked up my phone and dialed the local pizzeria. "Yeah, hi, I'd like to order a large pepperoni with extra cheese, please. How soon can you get it here?" I asked, hoping it wouldn't take too long. The voice on the other end assured me it'd be no more than 30 minutes. True to their word, the doorbell rang, and I rushed to answer it, eager for my cheesy reward. Standing on the doorstep was a young man, probably in his mid-20s, with a warm smile and a pizza box in hand. "Evening, ma'am. Pizza delivery," he said, his eyes scanning the grandeur of the foyer behind me. "Thanks. Just put it here." I gestured to the console table near the door, fishing for my wallet. As I handed him the cash, our eyes met, and an awkward yet friendly silence fell between us. He broke the ice first. "You work here long? This place is massive," he asked, curiosity lighting up his eyes. I couldn't help but smile at the assumption. "Something like that." I played along, not ready to reveal the whole truth. "Owners are quite the characters, you know?" "Yeah? They must be loaded to live in a place like this." "Must be nice, huh?" He chuckled, shifting the pizza box under his arm. "Suppose so," I replied, leaning against the door frame. "They're not home much. Always traveling or caught up in work." He nodded, understandingly. "Sounds lonely. You get to hang around in all this luxury, though. Not a bad deal, eh?" I laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. "Guess you could say that. Beats the hustle outside." We chatted for a few more minutes, him asking about the owners and me spinning tales that were half true. There was something about this guy, a sincerity mixed with curiosity, that made me want to keep talking. "Hey, if you're not busy, maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime? You know, when you're not working," he ventured, a hopeful look in his eyes. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew this little game of pretend couldn't last forever. "Sure, why not? Could use a friend around here," I found myself saying, surprising even me. "Great. I'm Alex, by the way." He extended his hand, which I shook, feeling the warmth of his grasp. "Emma," I introduced myself, deciding to stick to at least one truth tonight. After that first unexpected meeting with Alex, things started to pick up speed faster than I could have imagined. Our first coffee date turned into a series of meetups, each one more interesting than the last. It wasn't long before I found myself looking forward to our time together, enjoying the simplicity and authenticity of our conversations. It was a refreshing change from the usual circles I found myself in. One evening, as we were walking through the park after grabbing a bite from a food truck, Alex turned to me, his expression curious. "Emma, you ever think about what it's like, living a life without all this?" He gestured around, implying the modest surroundings compared to the grandeur of my home. I shrugged, keeping my response light. "Sometimes, I guess. But it's not the place that makes the life, you know? It's the people, the experiences." He nodded, looking thoughtful. "Yeah, I get that. Just seems like a different world from mine, is all." As days turned into weeks, our casual outings started to feel like something more. Alex was different. He didn't put on airs or try to impress with grand gestures. He was just himself, and that made me feel comfortable being me, or at least, the version of me I had presented to him. One night, we found ourselves at a local dive bar, the kind of place I'd never stepped foot in before meeting him. The atmosphere was lively, filled with the buzz of conversation and laughter. We squeezed into a booth, the dim lighting casting shadows over our table. "So, Emma," Alex started, a playful edge to his voice, "ever think about ditching the fancy life and running away to a cabin in the woods? Just you, me, and nature?" I laughed, the idea so far from my reality, but oddly appealing. Run away to a cabin, huh? And leave all my responsibilities behind? Tempting, but I think I'd miss the chaos of my life. He leaned in, his gaze intense. "I'm serious. You ever just want to get away from it all? No expectations, no pressures?" I met his gaze, feeling a surge of honesty. "Yeah, I do. More often than you'd think. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if things were different, simpler." Alex reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "Emma, whatever life you've got waiting for you out there, I want you to know I'm here for you. Doesn't matter if it's a mansion or a cabin in the woods. I like you for you." It had been a few months since Alex and I started seeing each other. Our relationship, built on a foundation of supposed simplicity and modest living, was about to face its first real test. I had danced around the truth of my identity for too long, and the weight of the lie was becoming unbearable. It was time to come clean, to reveal the world I actually came from. But how do you tell someone you've been lying to them about who you are since the day you met? I decided to invite Alex over for dinner at my place, well, the mansion that he thought belonged to my employers. It was the setting of our first encounter and, in my mind, the fitting place for my confession. As I prepared dinner, my thoughts raced. How would Alex react? Would he see me as a liar, or would he understand why I did it? The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my reverie. It was showtime. "Hey, Alex. Come on in," I greeted him, trying to sound as normal as possible. "Wow, your bosses must really trust you to have you host dinner in their mansion," Alex joked as he stepped inside, looking around. I chuckled nervously. "Yeah, about that. Why don't we sit down? Dinner's almost ready." We made small talk as we settled at the dining table, the elaborate spread in front of us a stark contrast to our usual low-key dates. Alex seemed to sense something was off, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced with a look of concern. "Emma, what's going on? You've been acting weird all evening," Alex finally said, setting down his fork. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was now or never. "Alex, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." He leaned in, attentive. "Okay, shoot." "The truth is," I began, my heart pounding, "this house, it's mine. And not just the house. The business I told you I work at? It's actually my company. I inherited it from my parents." For a moment, there was silence. Alex's expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite place. "You mean, you're rich?" he finally said, his voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "Yeah, I am. And I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I just I wanted to keep things simple. I wanted someone to like me for me, not my money, I explained, bracing myself for his reaction. Alex sat back, processing the news. Wow, that's a lot to take in. So, every time we talked about your bosses, you were actually talking about yourself? I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Yes. And I understand if you're mad or if you want to leave. I just couldn't keep lying to you. There was a long pause, during which I could almost hear my heart beating. Then, Alex reached across the table, taking my hand in his. Emma, I won't lie and say I'm not shocked. But I'm not mad. I get why you did it. This world is full of people who would kill to be in your shoes, not for the responsibility, but for the perks. You wanted to avoid that, to find something real. I respect that, he said, his gaze sincere. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, mixed with a twinge of guilt for ever doubting him. Really? You're not upset? Alex shook his head. No. I like you, Emma. Not your money, not your mansion. You. This doesn't change how I feel. His words were like a balm to my frayed nerves. The fear of rejection, of judgment, melted away, leaving a sense of hope and newfound trust between us. Thank you, Alex. That means everything to me, I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We spent the rest of the evening talking openly about my life, my family, and the business. I shared stories I had never told anyone, feeling a connection to Alex that went deeper than before. After I let Alex into the real world of my wealth, things took a turn I didn't expect. He was all in, more than I ever dreamed. One evening, out of the blue, he dropped the question that would change everything. Marry me, Emma, he said, his eyes shining with something fierce. Let's do it big, in some jaw-dropping place. Then jet off somewhere, just you and me. The idea set my heart racing. A family with Alex, something real and mine, was all I ever wanted. But his vision of grandeur threw me. Alex, I love the thought of us, a future. I started, trying to keep my voice steady. But why all the flash? Can't we discover each other without splashing out? He didn't take it well. The look on his face was like I slapped him. What, my idea's not good enough, he shot back, a sharp edge in his voice. No, it's not that. I hurried to explain. It's just, I thought, maybe we could keep it simple, focus on us. He scoffed, shaking his head. Simple. Right. You're probably just too embarrassed to waste your cash on someone like me. That stung. Alex, stop. It's not about the money. I thought you knew that. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then, without another word, he walked out. He ghosted me for days after that, leaving me to stew in worry and doubt. Had I hurt him that bad? Was I wrong? I couldn't stand the silence and uncertainty. I picked up the phone and dialed his number, my heart pounding in my chest. Alex? I said when he finally answered, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma, he replied, his voice cold, distant. I'm sorry, I blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. If the wedding you want is what you need, we can talk about it. I miss you. There was a pause, long enough for my heart to sink. Then, slowly, he spoke. I miss you too. Maybe I pushed too hard. It's just, being with you, it's all so new to me. I got carried away. Relief washed over me, warm and soothing. It's okay, Alex. We're in this together, right? Let's figure it out, find a middle ground. Yeah, he said, a hint of the old warmth returning to his voice. Together. We met up the next day, talked for hours about what we both envisioned for our future. It wasn't easy, navigating the clash of dreams and realities, but we were committed. We agreed to take things slow, to focus on building us, before diving into any lavish plans. Living with Alex in my house started off as a dream. But dreams can get complicated fast, especially when they start messing with reality. Alex settled in quicker than I thought possible, acting like he owned the place. He'd walk around, making plans about changing furniture and fixing up rooms as if it were his personal project. One evening, he dropped a bombshell that caught me completely off guard. "Emma, we need to talk," Alex began, his tone serious, a stark contrast to his usual easygoing self. I paused, sensing the gravity in his voice. "Okay, what's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He took a deep breath, then let it out, slowly. "I've been thinking, about us, about how people see us. I know what it looks like, me moving into your place, all this." He gestured around, encompassing the luxury of the house in one sweeping motion. I frowned, not liking where this was heading. "What about it?" I asked, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. "It's just, I don't want anyone thinking I'm with you for the money, for the house. It makes me feel like a total jerk," he admitted, looking down at his hands. I softened, understanding his concern but unsure of the solution. "Alex, you know that's not true. Why does it matter what anyone else thinks?" "Because it does, Emma. To me, it does," he shot back, frustration lacing his words. "I need to know that you trust me, really trust me." "And I do, Alex. But what are you getting at?" I pressed, a sense of unease growing in my stomach. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a resolve I hadn't seen before. "I want us to sign a prenup. I'll give up any claim to your property, your money. I don't want a penny if things don't work out." The suggestion took me aback. "A prenup?" I echoed, the idea swirling in my head. "Yeah, a prenup. But there's more," he continued, hesitating before plunging ahead. I think you should give me half of the house. Before the wedding. So I can feel like it's really our home, not just me living in your shadow." The request hit me like a ton of bricks. "Give you half of the house? Alex, are you serious?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. He nodded, earnestly. "Yes, I'm serious. It's the only way I'll feel like I'm not just some charity case you're taking care of. I need to feel like an equal in this relationship." The conversation spiraled from there, his words echoing in my head long after we'd stopped talking. The idea of giving Alex the house, of proving my trust in such a tangible, irreversible way, felt daunting. Yet, his plea tugged at my heartstrings. He was convincing, passionate even, about making this work, about us being equals. In a moment of emotional turmoil, I agreed. "Okay, Alex. If it means that much to you, we'll do it your way," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Walking out of Mr. Thompson's office, I was still in a daze from what we'd just done. The paperwork, the formalities, it all felt surreal. But the cold slap of reality came faster than I could have imagined. "So, Emma," Alex started, his tone light but with an edge that immediately put me on alert. "Now that we're partners in this, how about we talk terms?" I blinked, confused. "Terms? What do you mean?" He stopped walking, turning to face me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, you see, I've been thinking. This place, our home, it's worth a pretty penny, right? About $7 million, if I'm not mistaken." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yeah, so?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "So, I figure my half is worth about $3.5 million. And I think it's only fair if you buy me out," he said, the words casual, as if he were discussing the weather. My heart stopped. "Buy you out? Alex, what are you talking about? This was supposed to be our home, not an investment." He laughed, a sound that made my stomach turn. "Our home? Please, Emma, don't be so naive. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. You can't blame me for playing it smart." I could feel the tears welling up, betrayal mixing with disbelief. "But, you said you loved me. That this was about us starting a life together." "Love?" he scoffed, shaking his head. "This was about securing my future, and thanks to you, it's looking pretty bright." I was reeling, each word a blow to my heart. "How could you do this to me?" Alex waved the property documents in front of my face, his smile cruel. "Because, Emma, you made it so easy. I mean, who signs over half their house to someone without a second thought? You really are a fool." The words cut deeper than any knife. I stood there, frozen, as he continued to mock me, laughter echoing off the walls of the world we had built together, a world that was crumbling around me. "You'll regret this," I finally managed to say, my voice a whisper. He stopped laughing, his gaze cold and calculating. "I doubt it. But hey, if you want to keep living in your precious house, you know what it'll cost you." With that, he walked away, leaving me alone with the ruins of my trust and love. In that moment, I knew I had made a monumental mistake, one that would change the course of my life forever. But as the initial shock faded, replaced by a burning anger and determination, I vowed to fight back. Alex may have thought he won, but this was far from over. Walking back into Mr. Thompson's office felt like stepping into a safe haven after being out in a storm. The look on his face told me he'd been expecting this mess from the get-go. "Mr. Thompson, I've messed up big time," I blurted out, barely able to keep my composure. He gestured for me to sit, his demeanor calm and collected. "Tell me everything, Emma." And so, I did. Every sordid detail spilled out, my voice shaky but determined. When I finished, Mr. Thompson didn't seem surprised. Instead, he looked thoughtful, almost as if he'd anticipated this all along. "Emma, there's something you should know about your father's will," he began, his tone serious. "He made it clear that the house would be yours, fully and completely, but only after you're married. Since that hasn't happened, legally, the transaction you made with Alex holds no water." I sat there, stunned, as his words sunk in. "So, you're saying, the house is still mine? Alex has no claim to it?" "Exactly," Mr. Thompson confirmed, a slight smile on his face. "Your father was a wise man. He protected you, even from beyond." Relief washed over me, followed by a surge of righteous anger. I want to make Alex regret ever trying this. "Is there anything we can do?" Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his chin. "Well, there's the matter of taxes. If he were the legal owner, he'd be responsible for a hefty sum in property and land taxes. Not to mention, there are restrictions on selling or transferring his share within 3 years of acquisition." A plan began to form in my mind, and with Mr. Thompson's guidance, I knew exactly what to do. I didn't waste any time. Picking up my phone, I dialed Alex, my heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and exhilaration. "Alex, we need to talk about the house," I said, my voice steady. He sounded cautious, but smug. "What about it, Emma?" I took a deep breath and launched into my spiel. "According to the law, you're now on the hook for a massive amount in property taxes. And let's not forget the land tax. Oh, and you can't sell or even give away your share for 3 years. So, good luck with that." There was silence on the other end, and I could almost hear the gears in his brain grinding to a halt. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Alex finally managed, his voice a mixture of disbelief and panic. "No joke, Alex. You wanted the house, you got it, along with all its obligations. Enjoy dealing with the IRS," I said, a hint of satisfaction creeping into my voice. Hanging up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about standing up for myself, about not letting someone's greed and manipulation dictate my life. Mr. Thompson smiled approvingly. "Well done, Emma. Your father would be proud." That evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the front yard, Alex showed up at my door, a look of desperation plastered across his face. The air between us was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl. "Emma, listen, I'm sorry," he stammered, avoiding eye contact. "I think you got it all wrong. About the house, the taxes. I need help. I couldn't help but let out a laugh, not because anything was funny, but because of the audacity. The nerve of him, showing up like this after everything. Sorry? You think a simple sorry is going to cut it after what you pulled? He shuffled uncomfortably, his eyes darting around, looking for any sign of sympathy. The taxes, Emma. They're going to bury me. You know I can't afford them. Standing there, watching him squirm, a sense of empowerment washed over me. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the documents, the very ones that could have sealed my fate to his. You want to know about taxes? Let me show you something. With a dramatic flourish, I tore the documents into shreds, letting the pieces flutter to the ground like the first snow of winter. There. Consider yourself saved from the taxes. This deal? It was never valid. We're not married, Alex. You never had a claim to my house. My dad made sure of that. You're free to go, free from any taxes this house might have saddled you with. The look on his face was priceless, a mix of confusion, relief, and something else, defeat, maybe. He was speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But, Emma, he started, but I wasn't having any of it. No buts, Alex. It's over. And just to be clear, I said, stepping closer, my voice low but fierce. If I see you around here again, I'm calling the cops. Got it? He nodded, a defeated slump to his shoulders, then turned and walked away, his steps heavy with the weight of his failed scheme. Watching him go, I felt a chapter of my life closing, one I was all too happy to end. As I gathered his belongings, dumping them unceremoniously on the curb, a promise to myself took shape in my mind. Never again would I let myself be so blinded by love or anything else that I ignore the glaring warning signs. I had learned my lesson, a costly one, but one that would guide my steps moving forward. I'm Ava, 33, knee-deep in the world of web design, and married to Mark, a guy who could charm the socks off anyone with his goofy smile. We met back in college, at some dingy bar where the music was too loud, and the drinks were cheap. I was trying to drown my exam stress in a pint of the most watered-down beer you could imagine when Mark sidled up, all confidence and bad pickup lines. You look like you've lost your last friend, can I apply for the position? He had said, and despite the cheesiness, I laughed. That laugh sealed our fate. Fast forward through years of cramped apartments, late-night takeouts, and dreams bigger than our paychecks, we tied the knot, ready to start a family. But, as it turned out, dreaming was the easy part. Years went by with no baby in sight. Every negative test felt like a punch in the gut, and the silence in our home grew louder with each passing month. Mark tried to keep things light, always the joker, but I saw the strain behind his eyes. Hey, we still got each other, right? Me, you, and this invisible baby makes 3. He'd jest, trying to wrap me in a hug as I stared off into space, wondering why something that came so easily to others was out of our reach. One chilly morning, feeling off and a bit queasy, I called in sick. Alone, with Mark off to work, I found myself staring at a pregnancy test in the bathroom. What the heck? I muttered to myself, the words echoing off the tiles. The silence of waiting was suffocating, and when those 2 little lines appeared, I couldn't breathe. No freaking way, I whispered, my heart slamming against my ribs. I was still staring at the test, disbelief and joy warring in my chest, when Mark came home. He found me on the sofa, the test clutched in my hand like some precious talisman. What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, dropping his keys and coming over. We're pregnant, I managed, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. He froze, his eyes flicking down to the test and then back up to meet mine. Are you shitting me? He blurted out, the shock on his face mirroring my own feelings. No, I'm not, I said, a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. I'm not shitting you. The moment stretched out between us, filled with a wild, disbelieving joy. Then, Mark scooped me up, twirling me around like we were in some kind of movie. "I'm gonna be a dad," he yelled, laughing, his usual reserve lost in the moment. The next day, he came home with a small box, wrapped clumsily in shiny paper. "For you," he said, a shy grin on his face. Inside was a pair of earrings, mother of pearl, shimmering softly. They were beautiful, unusual, and very noticeable. "To celebrate our little miracle," he said, his voice thick. I touched the earrings, then reached up to kiss him. "Thank you," I whispered, my eyes filling with tears. Not just for the gift, but for this moment, for us, for everything we had endured to get here. Mark, always the one to break a sentimental moment with humor, winked and said, "Now, don't go saying I never give you anything nice." Those earrings became my talisman, a symbol of our unexpected joy, a reminder of the day everything changed. After the initial shock and joy, reality set in. Pregnancy wasn't the glowing experience I'd been sold by every happy family photo and movie. It was hard, really hard. Morning sickness should have been called all-day sickness. I was a web designer by trade, glued to my screen, but now even the faint glow made me queasy. Mark was as supportive as he could be, but there's only so much understanding a guy can have when he's not the one turning into a human barf machine. "Babe, can you try working from the bed? Maybe it'll help," he suggested one evening, finding me hunched over the trash can in our tiny office. I shot him a look, half irritated, half grateful for his clumsy attempts at problem solving. "Yeah, 'cause coding while lying down is peak efficiency," I snapped, immediately regretting my sharpness. "Sorry, it's just, this is tough." As the weeks trudged on, my body became a foreign entity. I gained weight, my back ached constantly, and I developed a weird aversion to the smell of coffee, which used to be my morning lifeline. Mark tried to help by switching to tea, but he wasn't happy. "This is like drinking sad water," he complained one morning, staring mournfully at his mug. "I'd kill for a cup of sad water that didn't make me want to hurl," I retorted, sipping ginger tea that did nothing for my nausea but was supposed to be good for me. Work became my refuge, the one place I felt some control, even as my body rebelled. My manager, seeing my struggle, offered me the chance to work remotely. "Take care of yourself, Ava. We need you at your best, not at your breaking point," she advised over a video call, her face a pixelated mask of concern. "Thanks, I'll try not to code any bugs into the system along with the baby," I joked, grateful for her understanding. Mark was thrilled when I told him about the remote work arrangement. "That's fantastic. You can barf in the comfort of our home now," he said, wrapping me in a careful hug. "Yeah, the glamour is non-stop," I replied dryly, leaning into his warmth. But as the months wore on, the challenges only grew. Every appointment, every ultrasound, was a mix of terror and excitement. Mark was a rock, holding my hand, making bad jokes to the doctors, and promising over and over that he'd be there, no matter what. But as much as Mark was there for me, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. My body was doing something miraculous, sure, but it felt more like an alien takeover. I envied women who breezed through pregnancy, who glowed and thrived, while I barely survived. One particularly hard day, after a night of no sleep and too much heartburn, I broke down. "I don't know how I'm supposed to do this, Mark. How do women do this more than once? I feel like I'm falling apart." Mark, ever my rock, pulled me close, stroking my hair back from my tear-streaked face. Hey, we'll get through this. You're the strongest person I know. And remember, at the end of this, we get to meet our little alien overlord. That's got to be worth all the sad water and barf, right?" I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. "Yeah, I guess it is." That was our life now, a series of tough days brightened by moments of humor and love. Despite the difficulties, despite the fear and the pain, we were in it together, waiting for the day our lives would change forever. And in those hard, dark moments, that was enough to keep me going. After the baby came, I thought we'd be living in some kind of bliss. But, let me tell you, it was anything but. Our little bundle of joy? More like a tiny tyrant who refused to sleep. Night after night, it was just me, pacing the floor, trying every trick in the book to get him to settle. "Mark? Useless. I've got work in the morning," he'd grumble from under the pillows, as if I was heading off to a spa day instead of logging into my own mountain of work with a side of zombie-like exhaustion. "Great, 'cause apparently I don't work, right?" I'd snap back, bitterness creeping into my voice. It wasn't like my job just paused because I had a baby. Then, just when I thought we were getting the hang of it, life threw another curveball. I was pregnant again. The shock of it nearly bowled me over. "This can't be happening," I whispered to myself, staring down at the test. 2 kids under 2? How were we going to manage? Mark's reaction? "This is great news." He beamed, clearly not the one who'd have to push another human out of his body or juggle meetings with morning sickness. "Great? Mark, we're barely hanging on as it is," I retorted, my stress level skyrocketing. "We'll manage." "We always do," he said, but his words felt hollow. Easy for him to say. His parents, Diane and Jack, bless them, swooped in like some kind of cavalry. They'd drive in from out of town, armed with casseroles and an eagerness to help. "You kids need a break," they'd insist, taking over with a competence that left me both grateful and a little resentful. Why couldn't it be this easy for us? When our daughter arrived, all those fears and frustrations seemed to melt away, at least for a little while. Holding her, everything just fit. Like she was the piece of our family puzzle we didn't know was missing. "Hello, beautiful," I whispered, tears of joy replacing those of exhaustion. But the reality was, we were in over our heads. Mark was over the moon about our daughter, sure, but his solution to our chaos was to dive even deeper into work. "We need the money," he'd say, a defense that was getting old. "More than we need you?" I'd counter, watching the gap between us grow wider with every late night and missed dinner. His parents became our lifeline, filling in the gaps, supporting us when we were too stubborn to admit we needed it. It was a weird mix of gratitude and guilt, relying on them so much. In those early days, staring down at my daughter's face, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. But as the sleepless nights stacked up and Mark's presence became more and more like a guest appearance, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were drifting further apart. "Look at her, Mark. She's perfect," I'd say during one of his rare moments at home, hoping to bridge the gap between us. "Yeah, she is," he'd agree, but his eyes were always on the clock, his mind elsewhere. After our second kid came into the picture, things didn't magically get easier like I hoped. Between the sleepless nights and trying to keep up with work, I noticed the pounds piling on. It wasn't just the baby weight anymore, it was stress, lack of sleep, and grabbing whatever I could eat during a rare moment of peace. Mark? He seemed more distant than ever. Where we used to crash on the couch together, exhausted but together, now there was just this cold space. I told myself it was just a phase, that we'd get back on track soon. But deep down, I was worried. His work became his excuse for everything. Late nights, weekends, even business trips that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. Meanwhile, I was killing it at work, somehow managing to juggle deadlines and diapers. The kids, bless them, were turning out to be my little motivators. Seeing them thrive, especially after I managed to get them into a decent private kindergarten, gave me a weird sense of accomplishment. But Mark and I? We were like ships passing in the night. And when he finally did drop his bombshell, it hurt like hell. "You've let yourself go," he said one night, out of the blue. No lead up, no gentleness, just those words, cutting deep. I was stunned. "Excuse me?" He shrugged, as if he'd just commented on the weather. "You're not. I'm just not attracted to you anymore." It felt like a punch to the gut. Here I was, trying to hold everything together, and this was what I got. Tears stung my eyes, but I was too proud to let them fall in front of him. "So, what? You're just giving up on us?" He didn't even have the decency to look conflicted. "I don't know, Ava. It's just how I feel. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not sure how we'd gotten to this point. But by morning, I was done feeling sorry for myself. I decided to take control, for me and for our kids. I started eating better, joined a gym, and threw myself into my workouts with a vengeance. Mark's reaction? If you could call it that, was a big fat nothing. He noticed, sure, but he didn't care. Not really. He was too caught up in his own world, treating the kids like they were more of a burden than a blessing. We should have thought this through, he'd say, casting a cold eye over the chaos of toys and laughter. I bit back the sharper retorts that came to mind. Arguing wouldn't change how he felt, but I couldn't help but wonder when he'd become this person, so distant from the man I'd married. Despite it all, I pressed on. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could shed the weight and the worries. Slowly, I started to see progress, feeling stronger, more like myself than I had in years. But as I changed, Mark stayed the same. Indifferent. Distant. It was like we were living separate lives under the same roof. I missed him, or at least, I missed the idea of him, of us. Our wedding anniversary was rolling around, a day that used to mean champagne toasts and stolen kisses. This year, though, it felt more like a reminder of everything that had gone sideways between Mark and me. But I'm a fighter, always have been. So, I cooked up a plan to maybe, just maybe, salvage whatever was left of us. I called Mark during one of his rare breaks at work. Hey, our anniversary's coming up. Thought maybe we could do something special, I ventured, heart hammering. There was a pause, long enough for me to regret bringing it up. Sure, Ava. What did you have in mind? His voice was flat, distracted. I pressed on, nerves be damned. How about a weekend getaway? Just us, no kids, no distractions. Sounds expensive, was his immediate response, and I could almost hear his eyebrows raising in skepticism. I bit back a sigh. I found a deal. It'll be nice, Mark. Like old times. He was silent for a moment. All right, book it. But it's your show, Ava. I'm swamped here. Not exactly the enthusiastic partner I was hoping for, but I'd take it. I went all in, booking a cozy hotel room and arranging for his parents to watch the kids. I needed, this weekend to be a turning point for us. The day before our trip, I laid out the dress I'd bought especially for the occasion. I tried to find the mother-of-pearl earrings that Mark gave me, but they were missing somewhere. It's okay, I thought, because everything else is ready. I waited for Mark at the hotel, anticipation turning to anxiety as the hours ticked by. My phone was silent, his side of the bed untouched. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called him, my voice shaking. Mark, where are you? You're late. Look, Ava. I'm not coming, he said, and just like that, my fragile hope shattered. What do you mean you're not coming? It's our anniversary, Mark. I was on my feet now, pacing the room. He sighed, a sound that felt like a slap. I can't do this, Ava. Pretend everything's okay. I'm sorry. The world spun. So that's it? You're giving up on us? My voice broke, the hurt too raw, too deep. I don't know what else to do, he admitted, and the finality in his voice was a blow I wasn't prepared for. I hung up, numb. The night stretched on, endless and empty. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every second was a reminder of the gaping chasm between us, of the love we'd lost somewhere along the way. The next morning, I made a decision. If Mark had given up, fine. But I wouldn't let this break me. I spent the day at the hotel spa, walked along the beach, and dined alone, surrounded by couples. It was both liberating and profoundly sad. Returning home, I braced myself to face Mark, to confront the ruins of our marriage. But the house was quiet, too quiet. His parents greeted me with confusion and concern. Where's Mark? They asked, echoing the hollow ache in my heart. I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know where my husband was, physically or emotionally. Our anniversary, once a celebration of us, had turned into a stark, painful milestone marking the end of us. In that moment, I knew things couldn't go on like this. The distance, the silence, the pain, it was too much. I needed more, deserved more. It was time for a change, time to face the future, whatever it might hold, head on. But first, I needed to find those earrings, the last link to a time when love, not loneliness, filled our home. They were gone, just like the man who'd given them to me. And with that realization, the last piece of my broken heart finally gave way. The next few days were a blur of routine, taking care of the kids, working, and the constant, nagging thought of Mark's absence. It wasn't until I was out in the yard with the kids that the piece of the puzzle I wasn't even aware was missing fell right into my lap, or, more accurately, walked right up to my fence. It was our neighbor, Jenny, young and always friendly, but I hadn't really spoken to her since the kids came. Today, she was all smiles, waving at the kids. That's when I saw them, the earrings. My earrings. The mother-of-pearl ones Mark had given me, shimmering in the sunlight as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Nice earrings," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but feeling the sting of betrayal. Jenny touched one ear self-consciously. "Oh, these? They were a gift from someone special." She stumbled over her words, her face flushing. "Someone special, huh?" I couldn't hide my skepticism. "They look a lot like a pair I used to love. Went missing recently." The conversation was awkward, full of half-truths and dodged looks. It was clear there was something she wasn't saying. Later that evening, I confronted Mark. "We need to talk," I started, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "What's up?" He tried to sound casual, but I could see the tension in his posture. "It's over, Mark. I'm filing for divorce," I said without preamble, watching his reaction closely. He blinked, taken aback. "What? Why?" "Don't play dumb. I know about Jenny. The earrings, Mark. And everything else," I pressed on, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. For a moment, he looked genuinely shocked. But then, his expression shifted to something darker. He laughed, a harsh, angry sound. "So, you found out?" "Yes, I've been seeing Jenny. Gave her those earrings, because I wanted to. I don't care about us anymore, Ava." His words were like a knife. But I was prepared. "I want you out, Mark. And I expect financial compensation for your adventures." He exploded at that. "Compensation? You won't get a dime from me." That's when I played my final card. "Actually, I recorded our conversation just now. Your confession. It'll be more than enough for court." Mark's anger turned to disbelief, then fear. "You can't do that." "I just did," I said, the finality in my voice marking the end of our marriage and the beginning of my fight for justice. After I decided to file for divorce, things moved quickly. Armed with the evidence of Mark's infidelity, I felt a grim satisfaction knowing I had the upper hand. The court didn't hesitate. They saw right through Mark's excuses and awarded me financial compensation and alimony for the kids. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt significant. Mark's parents, surprisingly, came out firmly on my side. It was a bitter pill for Mark, realizing he'd lost not just his marriage, but the support of his family too. One afternoon, while the kids played in the yard, Mark's mom, Diane, and I sat down for a rare moment of quiet. "We're so sorry, dear," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "We never raised him to be this way." I nodded, not sure what to say. The betrayal still stung, but seeing them stand by me meant more than I could express. "I appreciate you both. The kids love having you around." Diane reached over and squeezed my hand. "They're our grandkids. We'd do anything for them. And for you. You're more of a daughter to us now than ever." Life after the divorce wasn't easy, but it was mine. The house felt emptier, yet somehow fuller too. Full of possibility, of new beginnings. The kids adapted, resilient as ever, finding joy in the simplest moments. And me? I threw myself into work and motherhood, determined to build a bright future for us. One day, I was at the park with the kids, watching them play, their laughter a balm to my soul, when Diane joined me on the bench. "You're doing an amazing job, Ava," she said, her tone sincere. "Thanks, Diane. It means a lot, coming from you." "We miss you guys when you're not around," I replied, grateful for her and her husband's unwavering support. "We wouldn't be anywhere else. Those kids, and you, are our family, no matter what Mark has done," she stated firmly. The conversation shifted to work, to the kids' latest antics, to the future. It was comforting, this new normal we'd established. A testament to the fact that family isn't always defined by blood, but by the bonds you build. As the months passed, I found strength I didn't know I had. The gym became a regular escape, not just for my physical health, but for my mental well-being too. My body grew stronger, and with it, my confidence. Then, one unexpected afternoon, I ran into Mark at a local cafe. The man sitting across from me was a stranger in many ways, worn down by his choices. "Ava, you look great," he said, almost in awe. I nodded, polite but distant. "Thanks, Mark. How have you been?" "Struggling," he admitted. "Listen, I've been thinking, maybe we could start over?" "I've changed, Ava." The words hung in the air, a tempting offer to rewind time. But looking at him, I realized I didn't want to go back. I had moved forward, built a life that was whole and happy without him. "Mark, I wish you well, I really do. But that part of my life is over. The kids and we're doing great. It's best we keep moving in our own directions," I said, my voice steady. He nodded, disappointment etched on his face. "I understand. I miss the family, you know?" "I know, but we're doing just fine. Take care of yourself, Mark," I replied, standing to leave. Walking away, I felt a surge of empowerment. The encounter, brief as it was, reinforced how far I'd come. I was no longer the woman who waited for her husband to come home. I was Ava, strong, independent, and thriving. My name's Sarah, 51 years young, or old, depending on the kind of day I'm having. If you're expecting a tale of whimsy or a life that's been anything but ordinary, you might as well grab a seat because it's been one heck of a ride. Let's start with the heart of my world, Emily. My girl, my everything. Raising her on my lonesome wasn't part of the dream, you know? Her dad decided a fresh start was in order, across the globe, no less, leaving us high and dry. That man swapped us out like last season's wardrobe, and before I knew it, he had himself a shiny new family. So, there it was, just me and Em against the world. My days? They blurred into one long shift, juggling jobs like a circus act. The diner by day, the bar by night, and on good days, a bit of cleaning work squeezed in between. Sleep was a luxury, a fleeting visitor between shifts. But seeing Emily smile, hearing her laugh, that was the real paycheck. But Em, bless her, she's 23 and still figuring out life's big puzzle. Jobs? She's had more than a few, but none stuck. It's the boss, Ma, he's a real piece of work. Or, I can't deal with customers, they're all insane. Excuses as colorful as a painter's palette. Each job ended with her back on our couch, phone in one hand, remote in the other. And me? I just couldn't stay mad at her. "It's alright, Em. Something better will come along," I'd say, hiding the worry gnawing at my gut. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you wear the world's troubles so they don't have to. One particularly rough day, after a double shift that had me more bone than flesh, I came home to find Emily sprawled on the sofa, a mess of job application forms scattered around like confetti. "Hey, Ma," she greeted without looking up, her attention glued to the TV screen. "Hey, kiddo. Anything bite today?" I asked, shedding my coat and the weight of the day. She shrugged, a gesture I knew all too well. Nah, it's all crap. Why bother? They don't want to pay a living wage anyway. I sighed, a mix of exhaustion and frustration brewing. We talked about this. You gotta start somewhere, right? Can't be picky in times like these. Whatever, Ma. It's easy for you to say. You're used to busting your back for peanuts, she fired back, her words sharp like a knife. That stung. Not gonna lie. But anger? It never had a place in our home. I bit back the retort simmering on my tongue and instead forced a smile. Maybe so, kiddo. But those peanuts kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. Someday, you'll understand that. Emily rolled her eyes, the universal sign of young adult disdain. Sure, Ma. I'm hitting the sack. Night. Watching her disappear into her room, a part of me ached. Ached for her to see the world not as an adversary, but as a challenge to be met head-on. Yet, there I was, picking up the scattered forms, tidying up the living remnants of her latest defeat. The thing about life is, just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball. And not the kind you can hit out of the park. No, I'm talking about the kind that hits you square in the chest and leaves you gasping for air. That's exactly what happened the day Emily decided to drop her little bombshell. It was a Tuesday, not that it matters, but I remember because Tuesdays were meatloaf nights. I was in the kitchen, elbows deep in ground beef, when Emily waltzed in, her face all lit up like a Christmas tree. Behind her trailed Alex, a guy I'd seen maybe once or twice before. I didn't have anything against him, but let's just say he wouldn't be my first pick for a son-in-law. Not that I was thinking about that kind of stuff, until I had to. Ma, guess what? Emily chirped, bouncing on her heels. I glanced over, eyebrow raised. You finally decided to clean your room? She rolled her eyes, a grin spreading across her face. Funny, Ma. No, better. Alex and I got married. You know that feeling when your heart skips a beat? Yeah, mine skipped, tripped, and fell flat on its face. Married? I echoed, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Alex stepped forward, a sheepish smile plastered on his face. Yeah, Mrs. S., we eloped last weekend. Surprise? Surprise was an understatement. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Eloped? I repeated, still processing. And you're just telling me now? Emily's excitement dimmed a bit, replaced by a defensive edge. I knew you'd react like this, Ma. That's why we didn't tell you before. But it's done. And we're happy, aren't we, Alex? Alex nodded, slipping an arm around her. Yeah, totally happy. I put down the mixing spoon, wiping my hands on my apron. This was a conversation that needed my full attention. And where, pray tell, do you plan on living? I asked, already dreading the answer. Well, here, Emily said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. With you, Ma. Where else? Where else indeed? I took a deep breath, trying to tamp down the rising tide of frustration. Emily, honey, you're married now. Don't you think it's time you? I don't know, started your own life? Somewhere that's not here? Her face fell. Ma, you know we can't afford that. Alex's job doesn't pay much, and I'm still looking. Looking. Right. The eternal job hunter. I looked from her to Alex, who seemed content to let Emily do the talking. Something about the set of his jaw irked me, the way he seemed to assume this was all fine and dandy. Look. I started, trying to keep my voice even. I love you, Emily. You know I do. But this isn't what I wanted for you. For either of us. Emily's response was swift and sharp. What, Ma? You didn't want me to be happy? Is that it? No, of course not, I countered, feeling the conversation slip away from me. I thought you'd want more. That you'd strive for more. More what, Ma? More work? More nights alone? Thanks, but I'll pass on that. The conversation spiraled from there, each word more heated than the last. Alex tried to chime in, but he might as well have been a fly buzzing around a hurricane. This was between me and my daughter, and it was clear neither of us was going to budge. In the end, we called a truce, but the air remained thick with unsaid things. Alex moved in the next day, his belongings taking up space in a home that suddenly felt too small. I retreated into myself, wondering where I'd gone wrong, how my little girl had grown so far from the dreams I'd had for her. The day I found out about the cancer was the day my world flipped on its head. I'd been feeling off for a while, but cancer? That word felt like a freight train hitting me at full speed. The doctor was gentle about it, but the words still stung. It's treatable, he said, but you'll need to focus on your health, maybe even take some time off work. Work. My lifeline, the thing that kept us afloat all these years, and now I was being told to step back from it. I headed home, the weight of the diagnosis crushing me. The house was quiet when I got in, too quiet. Emily was in her room, probably lost in her phone, and Alex, well, Alex was Alex, doing whatever it was that he did. I needed them, needed their support, so I called them both to the living room. Guys, we need to talk, I started, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound strong. Emily looked up, her eyes wide. What's up, Ma? You look like hell. I sighed, not sure how to say the words. I've got cancer, I blurted out, the words feeling alien and heavy on my tongue. There was a moment of silence, and then Emily's face changed, but not in the way I'd hoped. Cancer? But, like, what does that mean, for, you know, us? Her question caught me off guard. Well, it means I'll be going through treatment, and I had to quit my job to focus on getting better. The room went cold. Alex, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up. Quit your job? How are we supposed to live, then? My job barely covers my stuff. I stared at them, disbelief washing over me. This was their concern? Not my health, not the battle I was about to face, but their comfort? Emily chimed in, her tone sharp. Yeah, Ma, how could you not think about us? What are we supposed to do now? The disappointment hit me like a second diagnosis. My own daughter, the girl I'd raised, sacrificed for, was more worried about her financial comfort than my fight for life. I thought you'd be worried about me, about what I'm going through, I said, my voice breaking. Well, of course, we're worried, Emily said, her voice softening just a touch. But we've got to be practical here. You can't just quit and expect everything to be okay. Alex nodded in agreement. Yeah, it's not just about you anymore. We've got to think about the future. The future. Their future apparently didn't include the possibility of me not being in it. I realized then what I'd done, or rather, what I hadn't done. I'd raised a daughter who saw me not as a person fighting for her life, but as a means to an end, a financial safety net. After weeks of harsh treatments, the hospital finally sent me home. I was a shell of my former self, hollowed out by radiation and chemotherapy, clinging to the hope that within the familiar walls of my home, I might find some solace, some shred of normalcy. But what greeted me was far from the support and care I had envisioned. The air at home had shifted, it was thick with tension, heavy with unspoken resentments. My daughter, Emily, and her husband, Alex, had taken to treating me more like an inconvenient guest than family. Their patience wore thin at the slightest provocation, their words sharp and cutting. One day, trying to make myself a cup of tea, my hands betrayed me, trembling from the weakness that had become my constant companion. The mug slipped, shattering on the floor, with a sound that seemed to echo my own fragility. The crash brought Emily storming into the kitchen. Seriously, Ma? Can't you do anything right? Look at this mess. Her words were like daggers, and I stood there, mute, the shards of the broken mug mirroring the pieces of my heart. I'm sorry, Em. I didn't mean to. My apology was cut short by Alex's voice, barely a whisper yet loud enough to carry his disdain. "How tired you are, you sick old woman." Their words, sharp and unforgiving, were a far cry from the care I had hoped for, the love I thought we shared. Each day was a battle, not against the cancer that ravaged my body, but against the coldness that had taken root in my own home. I moved through the days and a days, my every action, every sound, seemingly an annoyance to them. Asking for help became an exercise in humiliation. Could you help me up?" I'd ask, reaching out for support. The response was always the same, a huff of irritation, a reminder of her own priorities. "And so there are plenty of things to do, and you too," she'd snap, leaving me to fend for myself. Night after night, I cried myself to sleep, the sound of my sobs a solitary lament in the silence of the house. I was a burden, a nuisance in my own home, my presence an unwelcome reminder of the fragility of life. Due to constant stress, my health deteriorated, and I was admitted to the room again. After weeks of silence and solitude in the hospital, the last person I expected to see was Emily. Her visits had become as rare as a cool breeze in a heat wave, and yet, there she was, standing at the foot of my hospital bed, looking every bit as uncomfortable as I felt surprised. "Hey, Ma," she started, avoiding my gaze. "How you feeling?" The casualness of her question, as if she'd been by my side all along, stung. "Been better," I replied, my voice raspy from disuse. "What brings you here, Em? Finally decided to check on your old mother?" She fidgeted, looking anywhere but at me. "Yeah, well, there's something we need to talk about. It's about the house." "The house?" "My sanctuary, the only legacy my grandmother left me, and our only real home." A lump formed in my throat. "What about it?" Emily finally met my gaze, her eyes hard. "Alex and we've been talking, and we think it's best if you transfer the house to us. Legally, I mean." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Transfer the house? To you and Alex? Why on earth would I do that?" She crossed her arms, her discomfort replaced by defiance. "Because, Ma, it's practical. Alex is sick of living there, like he's some sort of freeloader. We want to own it, make it ours. It's not like you're going to be around forever, anyway." Her words felt like a slap. The audacity, the sheer insensitivity. My own daughter, viewing my home, my life, as nothing more than a transaction to secure her future comfort. "You think I'm just going to hand over everything because your husband doesn't like feeling like a guest? In my own house? It's not just that, Ma. It makes sense. You're here, sick, and who knows for how long. We're thinking about the future." "The future?" I echoed, incredulous. "And what about my future, Emily? Did you ever stop to think about that? Or is it just about what you and Alex want?" She sighed, a sound of frustration and impatience. "You're being unreasonable, Ma. We're just trying to be practical here." "Practical?" I shot back, anger and hurt swirling inside me. "You're talking about my home like it's a prize to be won. I worked hard for that house, kept it through everything. And you, my own daughter, you come here, not to see how I'm doing, not to offer comfort or support, but to ask me to give up my home? For what? So you can feel more secure in your marriage?" Emily looked away. "I thought you'd understand, Ma. But I can see you're just too selfish to see the bigger picture." Selfish? The accusation was a bitter pill to swallow. My whole life, I'd given everything to Emily, sacrificed so much, and now, in my time of need, this was how she saw me? "Understanding has nothing to do with it," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is about respect, about family. And right now, I don't know if I even recognize you, Emily." Without another word, she turned and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my pain, and a heart heavier than it had been before. Lying in the sterile silence of the hospital room, the buzzing of my phone felt like a lifeline to the outside world. When I saw it was Janice, my friend who's been in real estate since we were in high school, my heart skipped a beat. She never called without good reason. Hey, Janice. What's up? I tried to keep my voice steady, despite the dread settling in my stomach. Sarah, I don't know how to say this, but I was at the office today, and I saw a listing. It's your house, Sarah. Emily and that husband of hers are trying to sell it. The room spun. What? That can't be right. My house? Are you sure? As sure as I'm standing here. I thought it was a mistake, but I checked the documents myself. They've forged your signature, Sarah. It's listed under their names now. Anger and disbelief churned inside me. But, how could they? I never gave them any permission. This has to be illegal. It is, Sarah. You need to act fast. I knew she was right. My next call was to Mike, an old friend from college who ended up becoming a lawyer. Explaining the situation left me feeling exposed and vulnerable, but Mike's calm demeanor was a small comfort. Sarah, this is serious. We need to file for an injunction immediately to stop the sale. I'll need every piece of documentation you have on the house. We can argue forgery and undue influence, but we have to move quickly. Okay, Mike. I'll get you everything. I can't believe Emily would do this to me. To her own mother. It's unfortunate, but let's focus on protecting what's yours. I'll start the paperwork. Hang tight, Sarah. Hanging up, I was enveloped by a profound sense of betrayal. My own daughter, scheming behind my back to steal the only thing I had left from my grandmother. The thought was suffocating. Days passed in a blur of legal documents and phone calls. Mike was a godsend, navigating the legal maze with a precision that gave me hope. Meanwhile, I couldn't bring myself to confront Emily, not yet. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. For days, I interacted with Emily and Alex as if all was well, all the while coordinating with Mike to build our case. Their casualness around me, the way they dodged my gaze, only fueled my resolve. I had to protect what was rightfully mine. When Emily came to visit, feigning concern, I had to stifle a scoff. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. How are you holding up? Her words were hollow, and I played along. I've been better, Em. But I'm hanging in there. How's things at home? I prodded, curious if she'd slip up. Good, good. Alex and I are just, keeping busy. The evasion in her voice was palpable. The conversation danced around the elephant in the room, both of us playing our parts in a twisted performance. After she left, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow for the relationship we once had. But this betrayal? It was a line crossed, and there was no turning back. Mike called later with updates. We're all set, Sarah. You ready for this? More than ever, Mike. Let's do it. As I lay in my hospital bed, staring at the sterile ceiling, I couldn't help but marvel at the situation. My own daughter, plotting against me, and here I was, about to turn the tables. Released from the hospital for a bit, I have started to fulfill my plan. Janice was in on it too. She helped me set it up so I'd show up at my own house, pretending to be interested in buying it. The thought alone had my heart racing with a mix of nerves and a strange sense of excitement. I arrived at the house, dressed differently, hoping Emily and Alex wouldn't recognize me right off the bat. The moment they opened the door, their faces went from eager to sell to outright horror. It was almost comical, seeing them scramble to make sense of what was happening. Mom? What are you doing here? Emily stammered, her face pale. Thought I'd take a look at my own house, considering it's up for sale and all. Nice listing, by the way, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Alex, ever the smooth talker, tried to recover. Sarah, look, this is just a big misunderstanding. Let's talk about this. Misunderstanding? I scoffed. Forging my signature and trying to sell my house is a bit more than that, don't you think? Without another word, I stepped outside and called the police. As I explained the situation, I watched Emily and Alex from the window, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. When the police arrived, Emily and Alex were taken away in handcuffs. Their pleas and cries echoed down the street, but my heart was hardened against them. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. After the dust settled, the quiet in my house was both eerie and soothing. It was just me now, alone with the echoes of a life that once was. The days melded into one another as I focused on my health, on healing not just my body, but my battered heart as well. Miraculously, my health began to turn a corner. The cancer that once seemed like a death sentence slowly retreated into the shadows, giving me a new lease on life. The trial of Emily and Alex was a spectacle, one I attended with a heavy heart. Watching them, so small and defeated in the courtroom, stirred something in me, but it wasn't enough to overcome the betrayal. They pleaded, tears streaming down their faces, begging for my forgiveness. But forgiveness was a river that had run dry. The court handed down a modest sentence for their crimes, but no punishment could right the wrongs they'd done. Word got around, as it always does in small towns. Some folks shook their heads, sking at my hard-heartedness, unable to understand how I could turn my back on my own flesh and blood. But most knew the pain of betrayal, and they stood by me, offering nods of understanding and silent support. It's funny, really, how something so earth-shattering can shift your perspective. I used to care so much about what people thought, about being the perfect mother, the perfect neighbor. But life has a way of teaching you that perfection is a facade, and approval is a fickle friend. One afternoon, as I sat on my porch, basking in the solitude, Janice stopped by, her presence a welcome break in the monotony. "Sarah, you're looking better every day," she said, taking the seat beside me. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached deep into my weary soul. Feeling it, too. It's funny how peace can heal you in ways medicine can't. Janice nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Not everyone agrees with your choices, you know. But I think you're one of the bravest people I know." I let out a chuckle, a sound tinged with sadness and wisdom born of pain. Brave? No, I wouldn't say that. Just tired. Tired of bending until I break. Now, I'm just living for me, and if that's brave, then so be it. Janice squeezed my hand, a silent show of solidarity. Living for yourself is all any of us can do, Sarah. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing a damn fine job at it. As she left, her words lingered in the air like a benediction. I turned my face to the sky, letting the warmth of the sun seep into my bones. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something like hope, like joy. So, I live. I live for the quiet mornings and the peaceful nights. I live for the friends who stood by me and for the strength I found in solitude. I live with the knowledge that not everyone will understand my journey, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, it's my journey, and mine alone. The day I moved in with Uncle John and Aunt Maria, my life took a sharp turn. Their house was nothing like the warm, loving home I'd lost. It was colder, stricter, a place where laughter seemed to echo with a hint of bitterness. Ellie, their daughter, met me with a stare that could freeze boiling water. "Great, now we've got a charity case living with us," Ellie muttered under her breath as I lugged my suitcase into what would be my new room. Aunt Maria shot her a look. "Ellie, that's enough. She's family, and we're doing the right thing." Uncle John, a man of few words, simply nodded. "You'll follow our rules here, Ruth. We expect you to contribute like everyone else." I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. I was just 11, trying to find my footing in a world that had suddenly turned upside down after my parents died in a car accident. The first few days were a blur of new rules and chores. Ellie made sure to remind me of my place at every turn. "Why are you even here? You're not really one of us," she sneered one day as we washed dishes. "Just a little orphan girl living off our charity." I clenched my jaw, focusing on the soapy water. "I'm here because your parents took me in," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, and don't you forget it. You owe us," Ellie snapped back, splashing water in my direction. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, listening to the silence of the house, missing my parents more than ever. Tears were my only solace, but I never let Ellie or her parents hear me cry. I made a silent vow to myself, I would endure, no matter what. Helping with the housework became my escape. Aunt Maria was particular about how things were done, and I learned quickly to avoid her criticism. "You call this clean?" she'd often scold, pointing at a spot I'd missed on the floor. "Sorry, Aunt Maria. I'll do it again," I'd say, grabbing the mop and going over the spot until she was satisfied. Uncle John was a stern man, his words sparing but sharp. "We're not running a hotel here, Ruth. Pull your weight," he'd remind me, even though I was already doing more chores than Ellie. Ellie, for her part, never missed a chance to make my life harder. She'd hide my sewing supplies, knowing how much I loved to sew, then feign innocence when I couldn't find them. "Looking for these?" she'd taunt, holding my scissors just out of reach. "Maybe if you're nice to me, I'll give them back." But I never retaliated. I kept to myself, burying my hurt and focusing on my sewing. It was my one joy, the thread that connected me to happier times with my parents. I started with doll clothes, moving on to alter whatever old clothes I could find. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Life with Uncle John and Aunt Maria was a mixed bag. They provided a roof over my head, sure, but it was Ellie who made sure I never forgot I was different. Amid the coldness and the chores, I found my escape in a corner of my room with a needle, thread, and old fabrics that whispered promises of transformation. One evening, as I was turning a faded curtain into a skirt, Ellie barged into my room without knocking. "What are you doing with that old rag?" she sneered, her eyes scanning my makeshift sewing station. "Just making something new," I replied, keeping my focus on the fabric under my hands. I wasn't about to let her see how much her words stung. Ellie laughed, a harsh sound that filled the small space. "You think you're some kind of designer? Please. You'll always be wearing hand-me-downs and trash." I bit back a retort, choosing silence over fueling the fire. She shook her head, smirking, and left, leaving a trail of scorn in her wake. The next day at school, I wore the skirt. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I paired it with a simple top I'd altered, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. That's when Kelly, a girl from my class, noticed. "Hey, Ruth, that's a cool skirt. Did you get that downtown?" she asked, eyeing the pattern with genuine interest. I hesitated, then decided on the truth. "No, I made it myself." "Seriously? That's awesome. You've got talent," Kelly said, her words a balm to the sting of Ellie's mockery. Encouraged by Kelly's reaction, I started spending every spare moment sewing. My room became a sanctuary filled with fabric scraps and dreams stitched into reality. Each piece I created was a step away from the identity Ellie and her parents imposed on me. One Saturday, as I was cutting into a dress that Aunt Maria had declared too old, Uncle John walked in. "What's all this?" he grumbled, surveying the mess of fabrics and patterns scattered around. "I'm making something new to wear," I said, trying to keep my voice steady under his scrutiny. He picked up a piece of fabric, twisting it in his hands. "Seems like a waste of time. You should focus on your chores, not play dress-up." His words were like a slap, dismissing not just my passion, but my efforts to rise above my circumstances. "It's not a waste," I muttered, but he was already walking away, uninterested in my defense. Despite their disdain, I couldn't stop. Sewing became more than a hobby, it was my rebellion, my claim to an identity they couldn't touch. Each stitch was a word in the narrative I was writing for myself, one where I wasn't just the orphan niece, but Ruth, the girl who could create beauty from neglect. Things took a sharp turn after I hit 18. Ellie got herself a shiny new car for her birthday, a sleek thing that made my heart sink every time it roared to life. Meanwhile, Uncle John and Aunt Maria suddenly upgraded their lives with fancy gadgets and furniture that seemed out of place in our modest home. It was clear they were living it up, while I was left figuring out how to stretch every penny. One day, as I was mulling over the idea of getting a job post-high school, Aunt Maria dropped a bombshell. "Your parents left you some money for college," she said nonchalantly, as if mentioning the weather. I was stunned. "Really? I had no idea." "Yeah, but there's a catch," Uncle John chimed in, his tone sharp. "You're staying local for college. It's safer, and we can keep an eye on you." My dream of leaving for a big city to study fashion design crumbled. But "No buts," Aunt Maria cut me off. "We've decided. You can thank us later." I swallowed my protests. Arguing was pointless. So, I enrolled in the local college, my dreams of fashion design barely hanging by a thread. Needing to support myself and save for the future, I landed a job as an assistant secretary at a law office nearby. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. "Look at you, all grown up and working," Ellie sneered one evening as I was sketching designs. "Still playing dress-up, I see." "Better than playing spoiled brat," I retorted without looking up. My patience with her was wearing thin. She huffed, clearly annoyed, and stormed out. I couldn't help but smile a little. For once, I had the last word. Despite the setbacks, I didn't give up on fashion. Every evening, after work and classes, I'd dive into my world of sketches and fabrics, transforming Ellie's discarded clothes into pieces that felt like me. It was my rebellion, my way of holding on to the dream, even if it was stitched together from the leftovers of someone else's life. Working late again, Ruth, my coworker, Mike, asked one evening as he passed by my desk. "Yeah, got a project I'm passionate about," I replied, packing up my sketches discreetly. "Must be nice, having something you love doing," he said, a hint of envy in his voice. "It is," I admitted, feeling a surge of pride. "It's not much, but it's mine." Walking home that night, I felt a mix of emotions. Frustration, for sure, at the way my life was hemmed in by my guardian's decisions. But also determination. I might have been forced to stay local, but I wasn't going to let that define me or my future. The more time passed, the more I started to feel like I was living in a house of cards, about to crumble at any moment. Uncle John and Aunt Maria, who once lived as modestly as monks, were suddenly splurging like lottery winners. First, it was Aunt Maria flaunting a fur coat so pricey, it could have fed us for months. Then, Uncle John brought home a TV so big, you'd think we were running a cinema out of our living room. And Ellie, who never lifted a finger for work or study, was now flashing gadgets I'd only seen in glossy magazine ads. It didn't add up. I wasn't a genius at math, but even I knew our household budget couldn't magically stretch to cover luxury splurges. They were being dodgy about where all this cash was coming from, and it set my nerves on edge. One evening at dinner, with the new TV blaring some reality show in the background, I decided to poke the bear. "So, where's all this new stuff coming from?" "Last I checked, we weren't hitting the jackpot every week," I said, trying to keep my voice light, but my words came out sharper than I intended. Aunt Maria shot me a look, her eyes narrowing. "That's none of your business, young lady," she snapped, her tone icy. Uncle John, caught off guard, almost choked on his food. Coughing, he managed to say, "Well, I got a promotion at work." "Yeah, that's it. A big one." "Promotion, huh?" I pressed, not buying it for a second. Must have been one heck of a jump to start throwing money around like this. Ellie, sensing tension, quickly chimed in with her usual snark. "What's it to you, Ruth? Jealous much? Not all of us need to scrape by, you know." I clenched my fists under the table, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. "Just curious is all." Seems weird, doesn't it? Suddenly living like kings out of nowhere. The room went silent, the only sound coming from the TV's chatter. Uncle John and Aunt Maria exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Uncle John cleared his throat. "Let's just say we've been careful with our savings, all right? No need to worry your little head about it." "Careful with savings?" Right. I knew something was off. The dots weren't connecting, and their answers were as flimsy as a house of cards in a windstorm. That night, as I lay in bed, the pieces of the puzzle nagged at me. The fur coat, the TV, Ellie's gadgets, and the documents. Those endless documents they had me sign, always with the excuse that it was for benefits or some other vague reason. I trusted them, never bothering to read what I was signing. But lying there, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Could those signatures of mine be the source of their sudden wealth? The deception swirling around my guardian's sudden wealth weighed heavily on me, but amidst the chaos, a sliver of light shone through. Tom. He worked part-time at the law office, a law student with a sharp mind and a kind heart. Our connection was immediate, a bond formed over shared dreams and the mundane realities of office life. One afternoon, while organizing files, our hands brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through me. We locked eyes, and he smiled. "Ruth, you ever think about escaping this place?" he asked, his voice low. "All the time," I admitted, feeling a flush of warmth. "But it feels like I'm stuck in quicksand." He nodded, understanding. "Well, if you ever need a partner in crime, you know where to find me." It was a joke, but it sparked something between us, a flicker of rebellion against the constraints of our lives. Our secret rendezvous became the highlight of my days, stolen moments filled with laughter and dreams. But as our connection deepened, Aunt Maria grew suspicious. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen. "I've seen you sneaking around with that boy from the office." "Don't think I haven't noticed," she hissed, her eyes boring into mine. I tried to keep my composure. "Tom's just a friend, Aunt Maria. Nothing to worry about." "A friend, huh? Don't play me for a fool, Ruth. You're not to see him again. It's for your own good," she snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. I was stunned. "You can't control who I see or what I feel. Tom's a good person." Aunt Maria's face hardened. "I won't have you ruining your future for some boy. You'll thank me one day." I bit my tongue, anger and frustration boiling inside. It was clear she wouldn't listen. From that moment, Tom and I knew we had to meet in secret, our love a forbidden flame that refused to be extinguished. "Looks like we're modern-day Romeo and Juliet," Tom joked one night as we huddled in the shadows of a park, far from prying eyes. "I guess that makes Aunt Maria the villain in our story," I replied, trying to smile, despite the bitterness in my heart. "We'll find a way out of this, Ruth. Together," Tom said, taking my hand. His determination was comforting, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But our secret meetings couldn't go unnoticed forever. Ellie, ever the spy, caught us one day and wasted no time in running back to Aunt Maria and Uncle John. The confrontation that followed was explosive. "You're grounded. No more job, no more college until you learn your place," Uncle John declared, his face red with anger. "You can't do this. You're not my jailers." I shot back, defiance rising in me. Aunt Maria's laugh was cold and sharp. "Oh, but we can, dear. You'll learn to obey, or you'll lose everything." The threat was real, and the stakes were higher than ever. In the dead of night, Tom and I made plans to fight back, to reclaim my inheritance and our freedom. "It's us against the world, Ruth. We'll expose their lies and build our own future," Tom whispered, his words a vow I clung to. It was a chilly Thursday evening, the kind where the wind seemed to whisper secrets as it passed. Tom and I were huddled in the dim light of his tiny apartment, the only place we felt safe from Aunt Maria and Uncle John's prying eyes. The documents I had secretly photographed lay spread out on the coffee table between us, a silent testament to the betrayal I was about to uncover. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Ruth?" Tom asked, his voice laced with concern. He knew the weight of what we might discover. I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. "I need to know, no matter how bad it is." We started with the will of my parents, a document I had never seen before. As Tom read it aloud, the reality of their love for me, their hopes for my future, hit me hard. They had left me not just their savings, but also investments and properties, a legacy meant to secure my life. And there, in clear legal language, was the clause about my inheritance coming into full effect at 18. So, they've been lying to you, Ruth. All this time, Tom said, his voice tight with anger. But why? How could they just use me like this? The betrayal stung, a bitter pill to swallow. We dug deeper, examining the documents I had signed. Tom's legal knowledge helped unravel the complex web of deceit. Look here, he pointed out. By signing this, you basically allowed them access to your funds. They've been funneling your inheritance into their accounts. The realization hit me like a freight train. My trust, my loyalty, had been manipulated to fund their lavish lifestyle. I can't believe this. They told me it was all for benefits, for my college fund, I said, feeling naive and foolish. It's classic fraud, Ruth. And it's illegal. You have rights, Tom reassured me, his hand finding mine. The next steps were daunting. We discussed lawyers, legal battles, and the possibility of going public. The thought of facing Aunt Maria and Uncle John, exposing them for the frauds they were, made my stomach churn. We'll need evidence, solid proof that can't be dismissed, Tom said, already plotting our course of action. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been, but the fire of justice burned within me. Let's do it. Let's expose them. I can't let them get away with this. The determination in my voice surprised even me. I was no longer the timid girl who had arrived at their doorstep, seeking refuge. I was a woman wronged, ready to claim what was rightfully mine. The plan was set. We would gather more evidence, consult with a lawyer Tom knew, and build a case that would stand up in court. It was going to be a long, hard fight, but I was ready. Ready to face the guardians who had become my oppressors, ready to reclaim my life and my future. The days leading up to the court date were a blur. Tom and I spent every moment poring over documents, meeting with our lawyer, Mr. Henderson, and preparing our case. The evidence was solid, but the thought of facing Aunt Maria and Uncle John in court made my stomach twist in knots. Remember, it's about the truth, Mr. Henderson reminded me as we sat in his cluttered office, papers strewn about. Stick to the facts, and we'll get through this. The day of reckoning arrived faster than I had hoped. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and filled with the murmurs of onlookers. Uncle John and Aunt Maria sat across from us, their faces stoic, betraying no sign of guilt. Ms. Thompson, can you confirm that you were unaware of the contents of the documents you were signing at the request of the defendants? The judge asked, his gaze fixed on me. Yes, Your Honor. I trusted them. I thought they were looking out for me, I replied, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. Aunt Maria's lawyer was slick, trying to paint me as an ungrateful niece, biting the hand that fed her. Isn't it true that the defendants provided you with a home and care after your parents' tragic demise? He asked, his tone dripping with insinuation. They did, but that doesn't give them the right to steal my inheritance, I shot back, refusing to be intimidated. The turning point came when Tom took the stand, presenting the financial records we had uncovered. These documents clearly show the transfer of funds from Ms. Thompson's accounts to the defendants, immediately following her signature on the documents they presented to her. He explained, his confidence undercutting the defense's arguments. Aunt Maria and Uncle John squirmed in their seats, their facade finally cracking under the weight of evidence against them. After what felt like an eternity, the judge delivered his verdict. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates a breach of trust and fraudulent activity by the defendants. I hereby order the immediate restitution of all misappropriated funds to Ms. Thompson, along with appropriate penalties for the defendants. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Justice had been served. Outside, the sun seemed brighter, the air fresher. You did it, Ruth. You stood up for yourself, Tom said, wrapping me in a hug. I couldn't have done it without you, I whispered, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. With my inheritance rightfully returned, I set my sights on the future. With my inheritance rightfully returned, I set my sights on the future. I started studying to be a designer, fulfilling my long-held dream. It was difficult, but interesting. And it's fair to myself. Years had flown by, turning pages filled with trials into chapters of triumph. My atelier, once just a dream woven from threads of hope and defiance, now stood as a testament to my journey. I had built a name for myself in the city, not just as a fashion designer, but as a symbol of resilience. One afternoon, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across my studio, Ellie barged in, her presence as unwelcome as a storm cloud. Time hadn't been kind to her, the arrogance still hung around her like a tattered cloak, but desperation had etched lines into her face. "Ruth, you gotta help me." She started without a greeting, her voice a mix of demand and despair. "I'm in deep, really deep. I need money." I paused, the shock of her audacity giving way to a cold sense of inevitability. "Ellie, I can't just hand you money. But I can offer you a job. Work for it, earn it." Her reaction was immediate and volcanic. "A job? Are you kidding me? I don't need a job, Ruth, I need cash, and I need it now." She spat, her eyes blazing with anger. I stood my ground, feeling the weight of our shared past heavy between us. "I won't fuel your mistakes, Ellie. A job is all I'm offering. Take it or leave it." Her fury boiled over. "You think you're better than me now, huh? Just because you play dress up for a living?" She sneered, her words laced with venom. "No, Ellie. I worked hard for everything I have. I'm offering you a chance to do the same," I replied, my voice steady. Ellie's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "I don't need your charity or your lectures. You'll regret this, Ruth." As she stormed out, I felt a wave of sadness for what we both had lost, but also a deep, unshakable conviction in my choices. I had learned the hard way that no one could save you if you weren't willing to save yourself. Weeks later, news trickled down to me that Aunt Maria and Uncle John's house had been sold off to cover debts. Ellie had vanished, chasing after windfalls that would never come. The cycle of choices and consequences had come full circle. Sitting in my studio, surrounded by the vibrant chaos of creativity, I reflected on the journey. From the ashes of a broken past, I had carved out a space where dreams took shape, where resilience was the fabric of success. Tom, now my husband and partner in every sense, placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I smiled, leaning into his strength. "Yeah, I am. It's just, life's funny, isn't it? How it all turns out." He squeezed my shoulder gently. "It's not just life, Ruth. It's you. You made this happen. You turned the odds into your masterpiece." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, I realized he was right. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new book, one where the pages were filled with the colors of hard-won joy and the quiet strength of redemption. Life's never handed me anything on a silver platter. My name's Anna, and by the time I was 6, both my folks had passed, leaving me in the care of my grandma. She was tough as nails, but with a heart of gold. We didn't have much, but she made damn sure I never felt wanting for love. Education? Well, that was a luxury we couldn't afford. I learned to read and write, but school was a dream that ended when I had to start working to help out. I ended up waitressing at a diner downtown, a place where the tips were as meager as the hopes of ever getting out of there. But it paid the bills, or at least some of them, and it kept me on my feet. That's where I met James. He walked in one rainy afternoon, all drenched and looking like something out of a magazine with his fancy suit and that lost look on his face. "Can I get a coffee, black, and maybe a slice of your best pie?" he asked, shaking off the rain. "Sure thing, coming right up," I replied, trying not to show how his smile made my heart skip a beat. James was from a different world, one where people didn't worry about their next meal or whether they could afford the rent. We got to talking, him with his curious questions about my life, and me, well, I was just being my straight-up self. "So, what's a guy like you doing in a dive like this?" I couldn't help but ask. "Just passing through, looking for a bit of real life, I guess." He chuckled, that smile never leaving his face. "Real life, huh? Spend a day in my shoes, you'll get more real life than you bargained for." I joked back, not really expecting him to understand. But he surprised me. He kept coming back, not just for the coffee, but for the conversations. We talked about everything and nothing, and somewhere along the line, I started to fall for him. Hard. James introduced me to his world, one I never knew existed. Fancy dinners, parties where people talked about things I barely understood, and yet, he never made me feel out of place. He was different, kind, and genuinely interested in me, not just my story. Then there was Eleanor, James's mother. The first time I met her, I knew she was sizing me up, her eyes sharp, missing nothing. "So, you're the girl who's caught my son's attention," she said, her voice cool, her gaze even colder. "Yeah, guess I am," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Well," was all she said, turning her attention back to James as if I was no longer there. It was clear from the get-go she didn't approve of me. I was too simple, too uneducated, too everything she didn't want for her son. Eleanor's disdain wasn't the silent type. It was loud, clear, and made its presence felt every single time she walked into a room. If there was one thing I learned quickly after marrying James, it was that his mother, Eleanor, had an opinion on everything. And she wasn't shy about letting you know exactly what she thought, especially if it involved me. Living under the shadow of her disdain was like walking on eggshells, only the eggshells were made of glass, and I was barefoot. Every dinner, every family gathering, she had a way of making her disapproval known, her words sharp enough to cut through the thickest skin. One evening, James and I invited her over for dinner, a simple affair. I had spent the day cooking, trying to make everything perfect, hoping, foolishly, maybe, that I could win her over with my culinary skills. The moment she stepped through the door, I knew it was going to be a long night. "Oh, you decided to cook, Anna? How quaint," she remarked, her voice dripping with condescension as she glanced around our modest living room. "Yeah, thought we'd have a nice family dinner." "Sit down, make yourself comfortable," I replied, forcing a smile, trying to keep the peace for James's sake. James, bless him, tried to smooth things over. "Mom, Anna's been working hard on this meal. Let's just enjoy the evening, okay?" Dinner was a battlefield. With every dish I served, Eleanor had a comment. "This is interesting, Anna. Not what I would have chosen, but I suppose it's edible." I clenched my jaw, counting to 10 in my head. "Glad you think so. Tried something new tonight." James shot me a sympathetic look, his way of saying, "Just ignore her." But ignoring Eleanor was like trying to ignore a hurricane in your living room. The real kicker came when we were talking about Lily's upcoming school year. "I've been looking into schools for Lily," Eleanor began, her tone suggesting she had already made decisions. "The local public school simply won't do. A girl of her potential needs the best education we can provide." I felt my hackles rise. James and I have been discussing schools. We think the local school is just fine. Eleanor turned her sharp gaze on me. "Anna, with all due respect, what do you know about education? Your background doesn't exactly scream expertise in the matter." That stung. I could feel James tense up beside me, but before he could say anything, I jumped in. "My background might not be fancy, Eleanor, but I know plenty about making the best out of what you've got. Lily will be fine." The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. After Eleanor left, James tried to apologize. "Anna, I'm sorry. She's just set in her ways." "Yeah, I've noticed," I interrupted, not wanting to hear excuses for her behavior. It wasn't just the dinners or the snide remarks about my cooking or our home. It was the way she treated me, like I was an inconvenience, a mistake her son had made. But I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. I had faced tougher things in my life than Eleanor's disdain. What bothered me most was the way she talked about Lily, as if I had no say in my daughter's upbringing. The thought of her undermining me with Lily, teaching her to look down on where she came from, made my blood boil. James was caught in the middle, I knew that. He loved his mother, but he loved me and Lily too. "We'll figure this out, Anna. I promise," he said, pulling me into a hug. Eleanor's idea of music lessons for Lily felt more like a military operation than anything resembling fun. She'd march into our home, piano books in hand, a stern look on her face that would make a drill sergeant proud. Lily, bless her heart, tried to look excited, but I could see the dread in her eyes. It broke my heart. One afternoon, after another one of these so-called lessons, Lily came to me, her little face scrunched up in distress. "Mommy, do I have to keep doing piano with Grandma? She gets mad when I mess up. It's not fun." I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to do anything that makes you unhappy. Let me talk to Grandma, okay?" Lily nodded, wiping away a tear. It was the last straw. I decided it was time for a showdown with Eleanor. That evening, when Eleanor was about to leave, I stopped her at the door. "Eleanor, we need to talk about these music lessons," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Oh? What about them?" she replied, her tone icy, as if she already knew where this was going. "Lily's not happy. She's stressed and upset after every lesson. I thought these were supposed to be fun for her." Eleanor scoffed. "Fun? Music isn't about fun, Anna. It's about discipline, about learning to appreciate the finer things in life. Something you'd know nothing about." I felt my cheeks flush with anger. "Listen, I appreciate you wanting to teach Lily, but not like this. Not at the cost of her happiness." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "And what do you suggest? Letting her quit? That's the problem with your generation. Too quick to give up. No wonder you ended up where you are." That stung. More than I wanted to admit. It's not about giving up. It's about not forcing her to do something she hates. There's a difference. Eleanor shook her head, dismissive. "I won't stand by and watch my granddaughter waste her potential. If you're not interested in her future, I certainly am." That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat down with James. "We need to talk about Eleanor and these piano lessons," I started, trying to keep my voice even. James looked up, his expression wary. "What about them?" "Lily's miserable, James. She's scared of making mistakes because your mom's too hard on her. She's losing her love for music." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom just wants what's best for Lily. You know how she is with perfection." I felt my frustration rise. But at what cost? Our daughter's happiness? There was a long silence before James spoke again. "I'll talk to Mom. But Anna, you know how she is. She's set in her ways. Maybe we just give it a bit more time?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. More time? "James, our daughter is unhappy." He didn't meet my gaze. "I know, but Mom's heart is in the right place. Let's not make a big deal out of this, okay? We'll work it out. Just give it some time." The conversation ended there, but the issue didn't. James did talk to Eleanor, or so he said, but nothing changed. If anything, the lessons became more frequent, as if Eleanor was doubling down in the face of my concerns. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate music, it was the way Eleanor lorded over Lily, pressing her own brand of perfection onto her, that rubbed me the wrong way. But Lily was a trooper, and somehow, she managed to find joy in the keys, despite her grandmother's heavy-handed teachings. As our wedding anniversary approached, James and I decided to throw a party. Nothing too fancy, just a gathering of close friends and family to celebrate another year of us. The planning was going smoothly until Eleanor threw us a curveball. "I've arranged for a special performance," she announced one evening, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Lily and I will be playing a duet. You'll need to rent a stage and a piano." James and I exchanged a look. "A piano?" he echoed, clearly taken aback. "Yes, James. And make sure it's a grand piano. We'll be playing arpeggios, something Anna here might not be familiar with," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension. I felt my cheeks burn, not from embarrassment but from anger. The nerve of her, to assume I didn't know what arpeggios were. My grandmother had made sure I was as comfortable with Bach and Beethoven as I was with a frying pan and spatula. But I'd kept my musical skills a secret, a piece of me that I cherished privately, away from judgmental eyes. Not even James knew. But I swallowed my pride and bit back the sharp retort on the tip of my tongue. This wasn't about me or Eleanor. This was about Lily, and if playing this duet made her happy, then I'd move heaven and earth to make it happen. "Sure, Eleanor. We'll make sure there's a stage and a piano," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside me. Eleanor looked satisfied, her smile sharp as a knife. "Good. It'll be educational for you, Anna. A chance to see what real music sounds like." I forced a smile, imagining the look on her face if I sat down at that piano and let loose with a Chopin nocturne or a Debussy prelude. But this wasn't the time for showing off. This was about giving Lily a moment in the spotlight, away from the shadow of her grandmother's expectations. James, bless him, was clueless about the tension. "It'll be great, babe. Lily's excited about it," he said later, wrapping an arm around me. I nodded, leaning into his embrace. "Yeah, it'll be something all right." As the day of the party drew closer, I found myself feeling more anxious than excited. Not about the party itself, but about that performance. It was a reminder of how much I'd kept hidden from my own family, and of the delicate balance we maintained to keep the peace. The party was in full swing, laughter and chatter filling our backyard, transformed for the night into a slice of celebration. James was mingling, playing the host with an easy charm that made me fall for him all over again every time I saw it. Lily, dolled up in a dress that sparkled under the fairy lights, was buzzing with excitement and nerves about her upcoming performance. I was fussing over the last-minute details when Eleanor made her grand entrance, draped in elegance but with that ever-present air of scrutiny. "Anna, dear, is everything set for our performance?" she asked, her eyes darting around, assessing everything with a critical eye. "Yep, all set. The piano's tuned, and the stage is waiting," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Inside, my stomach was a bundle of knots. This whole setup was Eleanor's show, but it was Lily I was worried about. As guests settled, Eleanor decided it was time. "Let's not keep our audience waiting," she announced, herding a reluctant Lily towards the stage. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Eleanor stepped onto the stage, her heel caught on a loose cable. Time slowed as she stumbled, a gasp escaping from the crowd. Instinctively, she reached out, trying to steady herself on the piano, but instead, she tumbled, landing awkwardly on her arm. The music halted, replaced by murmurs of concern. James rushed to his mother's side, his face etched with worry. "Mom, are you all right?" he asked, as I hovered nearby, unsure of what to do. Eleanor, ever the prideful matriarch, brushed off the concern with a strained smile. "I'm fine, just a little mishap. The show must go on," she insisted, though her voice betrayed a hint of pain. James wasn't convinced. "Maybe we should cancel the performance, Mom. You need to get that checked." But Eleanor wouldn't hear of it. "Absolutely not. We've prepared for this, and we will perform," she said, her tone brooking no argument. I glanced at Lily, who looked more frightened than ever. I wanted to scoop her up and tell her she didn't have to go through with this, but Eleanor was already positioning her at the piano. The performance started, and it was clear from the first note that something was off. Eleanor's playing was hesitant, the fluid grace she usually possessed replaced by a stilted awkwardness. The pain from her fall was evident in every note she missed, every chord that came out wrong. A murmur ran through the assembled guests as the performance went on. It wasn't long before some couldn't hide their amusement, their whispers turning into barely suppressed chuckles. The sight of Eleanor, always so poised and in control, struggling to play basic arpeggios because of her injured arm was, I had to admit, a bit funny in a tragic sort of way. But my heart went out to Lily, caught in the middle of this farce, her eyes darting between the keys and her grandmother, a look of sheer panic on her face. The performance, meant to be the highlight of the evening, turned into a comedy of errors, with Eleanor's pride leading the charge. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. There she was, trying to maintain her dignity in front of an audience that found her predicament amusing. It was a humbling moment for someone who seldom found themselves anything less than perfect. As I watched Eleanor stumble away from the piano, her pride taking a hit right in front of everyone, I was torn. Part of me thought, well, it's about time she came down a peg or two. But then, seeing her trying to blink away those tears of frustration, my heart softened. She might be all sorts of difficult, but she didn't deserve to be humiliated like that. And Lily, my sweet girl, looked so upset by the whole ordeal, I couldn't bear it. Eleanor, her face a mask of disappointment mixed with pain, slowly moved aside. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't about to let the evening end on such a sour note. Not if I could help it. So, there I went, taking a seat at the piano beside Lily, who looked at me with wide, questioning eyes. Just follow my lead, I whispered to her, giving her a reassuring smile. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, curious, maybe even a bit skeptical. We started to play, and it was like magic. The notes just flowed, perfect and clear. For a few minutes, there was no Eleanor, no awkward tension, just me, Lily, and the music. I could hear the surprise in the room, the shift in the atmosphere as we hit our stride. The applause that followed was thunderous, especially from James, who looked like he might burst with pride. But it was Eleanor's reaction that caught me off guard. She was standing there, tears streaming down her face, but this time they were different. There was something like respect, maybe even a hint of regret, in her eyes. I had no idea you could play, she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the buzz of the room. A lot of things you don't know about me. I shot back, half teasing, half serious. It was a moment of triumph, sure, but it was also a bridge, a way to show her there was more to me than she'd ever given me credit for. Lily, ever the showman, took her little bow, her face lit up with a mix of relief and joy. And as the applause died down, I stayed seated at the piano, my fingers resting lightly on the keys, ready for the next piece. Wow, Anna, that was incredible. I had no idea, James said, his voice filled with wonder and something akin to disbelief. Eleanor cleared her throat, stepping closer, her gaze fixed on me. Anna, I must admit, that was quite a performance. You and Lily, you played beautifully together. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her concession. Thanks, Eleanor. Music's always been a big part of my life. Just never had the chance to show it off like this. The guests murmured their agreement, some still clapping softly, their smiles genuine and encouraging. It was a rare moment of unity, the usual tensions forgotten in the wake of our shared experience. Lily tugged at my sleeve, her earlier shyness replaced by excitement. Mom, can we play another one? Please? I looked down at her, her enthusiasm infectious. Sure, kiddo. What do you say we give them a little Beethoven? The mention of Beethoven caught Eleanor off guard, her interest piqued. Beethoven, you say? I didn't realize you were familiar with his work. There's a lot of things about me you're not familiar with, I shot back, not unkindly. I turned to the guests, who were watching our exchange with a mix of amusement and curiosity. Everyone, we hope you enjoy this next piece. It's one of our favorites. As Lily and I launched into the first few bars of Für Elise, a piece so familiar yet always capable of evoking deep emotions, the room settled into a hushed reverence. The music flowed from us, a testament to hours of practice and a shared love for the piano that I hadn't realized was so strong in my daughter. When the piece ended, the applause was louder, more assured. It was as if our performance had woven a thread of connection through everyone present, drawing us together in appreciation of something truly special. James came over, his pride evident. "I think we might need to get a second piano at this rate," he joked, but I could tell he was seriously considering it. Eleanor approached again, this time her expression softer, more reflective. "Anna, I was wrong about you. Your love for music, for our family, it's clear. I'm sorry for any harsh words I've said." I was taken aback by her apology, the sincerity in her voice unmistakable. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means a lot coming from you. Maybe we can start fresh?" She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'd like that. Very much." The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter, conversation, and even more music. Lily and I played a few more pieces, each one drawing cheers and applause from our guests. It felt like a turning point, a bridge mended through the power of music and a shared moment of vulnerability. It's been a while since that unforgettable night when music changed everything between me and Eleanor, my once daunting mother-in-law. If someone had told me back then that we'd end up close, I would have laughed it off. But here we are, and I can hardly believe it myself. Eleanor softened a lot, especially when it comes to Lily's upbringing. She's not as rigid as she used to be, and I see a warmth in her I never knew existed. These days, we often find ourselves sitting side by side at the piano, our fingers dancing over the keys in perfect harmony. It's become our thing, playing together during family get-togethers or quiet evenings at home. Who would have thought? One evening, as we finished a particularly challenging piece, I turned to Eleanor, unable to hide my grin. "Not bad for two amateurs, huh?" Eleanor actually chuckled, a sound so rare and precious it still caught me off guard. "Speak for yourself, Anna. I've always been a virtuoso in my own mind." Lily, who'd been listening, piped up from where she sat, a stack of music sheets in her lap. "Grandma, you're the best teacher. But Mom's catching up." Eleanor's gaze softened as she looked at Lily, then back at me. "We make a good team, don't we?" "Yeah, we do," I agreed, feeling a surge of pride. Not just in our music, but in how far we'd come, from cautious adversaries to partners in crime at the piano. James, ever the supportive husband and son, would often sit back with a contented smile, watching us. "You three are something else," he'd say, and I knew he meant every word. Eleanor and we talk a lot more now. Not just about music, but about life, love, and everything in between. She's opened up about the challenges of raising her kids alone, and I've shared my fears and dreams for Lily. These conversations, once unimaginable, have become a cherished part of our relationship. "Anna," Eleanor said one night, after Lily had gone to bed, "I was too harsh on you before. You brought something special into this family." Hearing those words, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means the world to me. We've come a long way, Eleanor and I. From tension and misunderstanding to respect and genuine affection. It's not always perfect, but the progress we've made is undeniable. And much of it, we owe to those evenings at the piano, where, through the universal language of music, we found a way to understand each other."